Chapter 1. A Tarnished Falls from the Sky. A golden meteor streaked across the night sky and vanished just as quickly over the central plains. Humans who happened to glimpse it paid it little mind, treating it as an ordinary shooting star. The romantic, artistic elves made humble wishes on it, while the dwarves tried to guess its landing spot in hopes of finding meteoritic iron. A gray-robed wizard with tired blue eyes watched the meteor's direction, a pipe clenched in his teeth, his old face thoughtful and silent for a long time. "An alien star falls, golden grace shall rise," he murmured. "Friend or foe?" He left the question unanswered, swung his leg over his horse, and rode off in the opposite direction of the fall. The Shire, Hobbiton. It was a fine, sunny afternoon, peaceful, lively, and full of the smell of pastries and tea. Bilbo Baggins, a proper hobbit, should have been inside Bag End, enjoying grilled sausages, toast, cookies, and a cup of black tea, sitting back in his rocking chair afterward and emitting the satisfied burp that is the highest praise a hobbit can offer an afternoon meal. Instead, he stood frowning outside his round green door, wearing a brown shirt and black trousers. A small crowd of relatives, friends, and neighbors were gathered with him, equally frowning, and all of them were staring up at the grass-covered earthen roof. "Bilbo, you ought to climb up and see what's the matter," said a sharp-voiced female hobbit in a dark yellow dress and a black hat, her eyes full of malice. "After all, it's your roof, isn't it?" "Don't think I don't see what you're thinking, Lobelia Sackville Baggins," Bilbo shot back. "You're just waiting for me to be struck by whatever's on my roof so you can sneak in and steal my silver spoons. You tried that last time, and I caught you." The others laughed, and Lobelia's face flushed. "But it did fall on your roof. You'll have to do something about it eventually." Bilbo shrugged. "That's none of your concern. Maybe it's a gift from the heavens, or I could sell it to a wizard, might fetch a good price. Then I could buy more cheese and sausages." Clang. The armor on the roof twitched, a metallic sound that silenced the crowd in an instant. Even the bickering Bagginses held their breath. After a long moment, there was no other movement. Bilbo let out a huge sigh of relief, then noticed the crowd had quietly dispersed, leaving a scattering of rubbish, seed shells and fruit peels. He sighed again, straightened his shoulders, and called, "All right, then. If something dares to crash down onto a Baggins' roof, it shall answer to a Baggins." He went back into Bag End, grabbed the frying pan he used for sausages and fish, and climbed onto the roof. The armor was humanoid, entirely sheathed in some unknown silver-white metal. The helmet had intricate branch-like carvings and a plume like snowy wolf fur flowing down the back. The pauldrons bore leaf-like engravings. Where the plates didn't cover, the figure was wrapped in chainmail, so Bilbo couldn't tell whether there was a person inside or some long-dead corpse. Perhaps an elf, he thought. He had read of them, but never met one. Equal parts frightened and thrilled, Bilbo tiptoed up and gave the chest a tentative tap with his frying pan. No movement. He drew back, blinking, and then with a gulp of courage, yanked at the helmet. Goodness me! Beneath it was a young human face, handsome, with short black hair. His lips were purple and his skin a pale, sickly color. He looked like he needed a warm bed, a crackling fire, and steaming broth more than anything. Bilbo had assumed the armor enclosed nothing alive, but here was proof otherwise. First thought, how did anyone survive a fall like that? Second, how on earth do I get him off the roof and into the house? Hobbits are generous by nature. Bilbo would not leave a person lying there. He glanced at the slightly sloped roof, then at the ground below, and considered. Struggling under the weight of armor almost twice his own height, he muttered, "You fell from so high in the sky. This short drop should be nothing for you, yes?" He put the helmet back on to protect the stranger, patted it down as if fastening a child's cap, and counted, 3, 2, 1 up. With a clang and a great heave, Bilbo managed to push the armored figure off the roof. The stranger landed in a heap right in front of Bilbo's door. "Whew, at least you didn't have to get any more mud on yourself," Bilbo panted. When the Tarnished came out of his stupor, he woke to a gentle orange light, the soft chirr of night insects, and the scent of herbs. A black iron chandelier dangled low from a brown wooden ceiling. The bed he lay in was shockingly short, so short that his legs were propped up on a padded chair at the foot. His heavy white wolf-like war armor had been removed and set neatly on a small cabinet. He wore only a black undershirt and lay under a clean white blanket that barely reached his chest. Somewhere a rhythmic chopping sound came with the smell of meat. Someone was cooking sausage. He tried to sit up. His body felt like it had been clawed apart. After several shaky efforts, he managed to go from lying down to sitting, his head almost brushing the chandelier. Where am I? Had demi-humans saved him? No. Demi-humans wouldn't keep a place so tidy, and they certainly wouldn't put an unconscious stranger in a bed. They would see him as an unexpected feast. A small figure, barely waist-high for the tarnished and clad in neat clothes, a brown waistcoat and short trousers, appeared carrying a tray. The creature's feet were large and covered in brown hair, bare and shoeless. Not a normal human's feet, yet not quite like any demi-human he'd seen. It was a hobbit. "Oh, my friend, you're awake," the hobbit beamed. "You've been in my bed for 2 whole days. If your chest hadn't been moving, I'd have thought you were dead." The tarnished gave an apologetic look. "I'm sorry. May I ask where I am? Rodell on the Altus Plateau, or a small town near Liurnia?" Bilbo blinked, glanced at the window to confirm he was still in Hobbiton, and said, "No, neither one. You're in Hobbiton. This place is the Shire." He set the tray on a small, low table beside the bed, low to a human but perfect for a hobbit, and smiled. "I made dinner, though I'm no expert at nursing the sick. Can you eat any of this?" He offered a plate of cod fillets browned in butter. The smell was mouth-watering. The tarnished tried to rise, and a hot pain lanced through him. Bilbo's face went concerned. "Oh, I forgot you fell from such a height. You must be broken all over. I haven't tended anyone before, but since you fell on my roof, I'll feed you, begrudgingly." "No," the tarnished managed. He gritted his teeth against the pain, raised his right hand, and made a few grasping gestures. A teardrop-shaped glass bottle winked into being in his palm, red liquid sloshing at the bottom. Good. There was one last sip, he thought. He tipped the bottle and drank. Warmth flooded him. The pain vanished within moments. His pale face colored, and his eyes sharpened. He pushed off the bed, then smacked his head on the chandelier with an owlish cry. Bilbo's mouth fell open. He had been about to stop him from standing. He cleared his throat. "You humans are quite tall for a hobbit home. Please sit down. Oh, I haven't introduced myself properly. My name is Bilbo Baggins. And yours?" He pointed at the empty bottle with wide, eager eyes. "How did you make that appear? Is it some wizard's alchemical potion? Are you a wizard, like Gandalf the Grey, who comes here to set off fireworks on New Year's?" The tarnished blinked. He had never met anyone so relentlessly cheerful. He answered as best he could. "I don't remember my name clearly. People called me the Tarnished, one without golden grace. I don't know this Gandalf you mention. And that bottle, it wasn't alchemy. It contained golden grace. If you have even a breath left, drinking a little can restore you to your healthiest state very quickly." Bilbo listened with rapt curiosity. "It won't cure diseases or poison," the Tarnished added. "If you were poisoned, it only returns the body to the state before the poisoning. The toxins remain. As for the taste, it's like a mix of apples, grapes, and strawberries." Bilbo waved a hand. "Honestly, I don't much care. Well, I do care a little. But you drank it all, didn't you, Miss Tarns?" He stumbled over the nickname, then laughed. "Never mind. Come, have some of my wine, and I'll make more dinner. Tell me your story while we eat. Wait here, just a moment." He hurried off on his wide, thick-padded feet without waiting for an answer, bustling about Bag End. The Tarnished watched him go, bewildered by the hobbit's boundless hospitality. He did not know that the hobbits were a gentle, peaceful people given to extravagant kindness. What the Tarnished did know, oddly at some deeper level, was that he had already endured 8 playthroughs and seen every ending. Chapter 2. May Your Journey Be Smooth. Moonlight filtered through the windows of Bag End, painting Bilbo's cozy rooms in silver. Dinner had been cleared by Bilbo and the stranger from the lands between. Because the visitor's height made it awkward to move around in Hobbiton, Bilbo had insisted on washing the dishes himself. When he returned, he caught the Tarnished, whom he decided to call Tarns since the name suited him and sounded right, munching on another apple. "Mr. Tarns," Bilbo said with a spark of curiosity. "You said you come from a place called the Lands Between? I've never heard of it. I hardly ever leave home. Still, my parents did travel once or twice, and sometimes I think perhaps I should get out of my warm bed and see the world beyond Hobbiton. What do you think? Should I go out and explore? The Tarnished considered for a long moment, longer than Bilbo expected, then answered quietly. I can't give you a single right answer, Bilbo. The outside world is not only beautiful, there is danger too, but beautiful memories will stay with you for a lifetime, and hard experiences will make you cherish your home all the more. He looked at Bilbo with a tone of deep longing. From what you've told me and from your kindness tonight, you must live in an incredibly peaceful place. I envy you, Bilbo. I truly wish my homeland could be as quiet and safe as yours. Bilbo wanted to laugh at first, but when he saw the restrained sadness in the Tarnished's dark eyes, he swallowed it. He pressed his lips together and said softly, Your homeland will be like mine someday, Tarns. The Tarnished simply smiled without answering. Feeling the conversation grow awkward, Bilbo brightened and asked, Tell me more of your adventures, Mr. Tarns. You must have seen many places. The Tarnished had no reason to refuse. He narrowed his eyes and let the memories come. Where to begin? Perhaps here. Fallen leaves bring word. At the edge of the mists lies my homeland, the lands between. As Tarns spoke, Bilbo was swept away. He heard of howling winds at Stormvale Castle and worried aloud at the might of the Omen and the brutality of the Grafted King. He marveled at the great waves of Liurnia of the Lakes, sighed at the full moon queen's love and the moon princess's patient waiting. Tarns told of the clash between the Shattered Star General and the Valkyrie in the Sealed Aeonian War, of the Bloodlord's plot on the Altus Plateau, of the blasphemous lord deceived by the great serpent on Mount Gelmir. Like a scroll unrolling, the tales painted vivid images Bilbo had never imagined. He heard of things he would never see if he stayed in Hobbiton all his life. A sudden longing rose in Bilbo. He wanted to see the underground Eternal City, to visit the ancient dragon city-state that drifted through space-time, to walk the land of shadow hidden in history. Above all, he wanted to see the Golden Tree. Tarns had mentioned again and again, an enormous tree that reached to the sky, radiant as the sun and bright as the stars, a source of prosperity for the Tarnished's homeland. The moon climbed higher, the room bathed in pure light as if someone beyond the glass listened too. And so the Elden Ring was restored. And the lands between welcomed a new king. That is the story of my homeland as I know it, Bilbo, Tarnus finished. He thought he could feel a god's sigh at his shoulder, praise, melancholy, sympathy all mixed together. Bilbo remained caught in the story for a beat longer before the Tarnished gently patted his shoulder and Bilbo exhaled, blinking at his slightly stinging eyes. He looked at Tarns with wonder. Your adventures are beyond belief, Mr. Tarns. You've been everywhere and been through so much. If you don't mind, may I write them down? I'd like to make a record, a little book for my descendants. Tarns nodded. Of course, Bilbo. If you need any details clarified, I'll help. Bilbo smiled and glanced at the window. Night had deepened. A wave of sleepiness stole over him, and he yawned. It's late. Let's call it a night. You can keep this bed. I'll sleep in my parents' room. See you in the morning, Mr. Tarns. Good night, Mr. Bilbo. May the moonlight guide your dreams, Tarns replied. Tarns too felt tired. He shifted to find a comfortable position on the small bed, and soon his breathing evened out. He fell into sleep. In his dream, he found himself in a pure white space, facing a kindly figure like himself in stature, crowned and bearded, strong and patient. When Tarns saw him, the name filled his mind. Eru Iluvatar, the creator. We have met before, Tarnis said, smiling at the familiarity. Iluvatar smiled back. Yes, when you first came into the void and fell into Arda, I saw you. I was unsure of your origin, so I did not awaken you fully. I gave you only the language of Arda so you could speak with its peoples. Tarnis caught more in the words, and his face fell. So the lands between is not the same here. Can I go back? Iluvatar shook his head gently. I have not found coordinates to your homeland beyond the void. Grief rose in Tarnes like a tide, filling him. Iluvatar's voice then changed the grief into something trembling and hopeful. But your homeland is within you. Tarnes looked puzzled. Iluvatar lifted a hand and pointed to Tarnes's chest. I can see all that belongs to your homeland there, within an Elden Ring that glows with a soft golden light. An Elden Ring? Tarns lowered his gaze. There, over his heart, multiple rings of pure gold began to glow. Inside the ring, his mind saw his homeland frozen and preserved, its memory sealed. Iluvatar spoke again. Go to the southwest of Middle-earth, south of the Shire. Your story last night filled me with wonder, and I will allow you to rebuild your homeland here and to make your music in the world I have made. Tarns watched the ring return to his chest and looked at the creator with gratitude. Thank you. Iluvatar touched his beard. Visitor from another star, I am not yet finished. You may make music here, but you cannot change the music I have already composed. Some things in Arda must happen as they must. Think of it as a grand concert. You may be a wonderful guest performer, but you cannot take over the whole performance. Tarnas bowed his head. I only wish to rebuild my homeland and protect it with my life. At the close of the movement, Iluvatar promised, I will help you. I will hide your homeland by my power in the central seas of the world, and it will be a great island in the ocean. Your deeds will become epics and myths among men. Now and then, those who hear such tales may sail to seek your island. Are you content with this curtain call? Iluvatar asked. Tarnis, whose own lands between had been a continent ringed by sea, did not find the arrangement unreasonable. He nodded. Iluvatar's expression softened. Farewell, then, visitor from another star. May we meet at the end of the performance. With that, Tarns's consciousness stirred. Birdsong cut through the silence and gentle sunlight warmed his face. He opened his eyes. Hey, you're awake, Tarnis. Just the man I was going to call. Did you sleep well? Want breakfast? There's fresh fruit, warm bread, bacon, and fried eggs. Bilbo appeared in the doorway, a tray in his hands and a delighted smile on his face. That cheerful, chatty kindness warmed something in Tarns that he had not felt in a long while. He returned the greeting, and they ate a hearty breakfast together. After a while, Tarns rose and stood by Bilbo's front door. I should be leaving today, Bilbo, he said, watching the hobbit bask in the sun and puff at his pipe. Bilbo's pipe stem stopped mid-suck. Oh, you're leaving already? You could stay a few days. There's plenty to eat here. Don't worry about food. Tarns smiled. Although we've only known each other a night, I trust you. But I had a dream last night. Someone told me to go south of the Shire to rebuild my home. Bilbo brightened as if the dream were reason enough. South of the Shire? That's quite a way. I haven't traveled far, but I've seen maps. Start east of the Shire, find the Brandywine River, and follow it south until you reach a place called Minhiriath. He hopped up. Yes, I have a map. Come with me. In typical hobbit fashion, Bilbo bolted into Bag End and returned with a rolled map. He spread it out and pointed. Here's the Shire, here's Hobbiton, and from here you go. He traced a route with the tip of his finger, helpful and precise as if he himself might one day take that road. Tarns listened and took the map when Bilbo offered it. Thank you, Bilbo. When I have rebuilt my homeland, I will invite you to visit. Bilbo beamed. Oh, I'd love that. I'd like to see that golden tree you spoke of. He suddenly slapped his knee. I nearly forgot. The journey is long. I'll pack you some dry rations and water, and an ample pack to carry them. He hesitated and added, You'll manage to carry it, won't you? I'd still advise you to go to Bree and buy a horse. But mind the Barrow Downs on the way. There are wights there, or so a traveling merchant told me. Tarns waved away the concern. What you already do for me is more than enough, Bilbo. As for a horse, don't worry. I told you last night, I have a magical whistle. It summons a spirit steed. Bilbo cleared his throat, slightly embarrassed. Right, I was too excited and forgot. Bilbo hurried to prepare sausages, cheese, bacon, dried fruit, and bread, easy to carry and long-lasting. Tarns donned his armor, though he left his helmet off inside the cozy hobbit hole. When Bilbo set the heavy pack before him, Tarns felt grateful to the point of being a little awkward. These are only half a month's rations from my pantry, Bilbo said modestly. If I'd worried about spoilage, I'd have given you more fresh food. It's more than enough, Tarnis said, thankful. Consider it thanks for your hospitality and your listening. Then I wish you a safe journey, Mr. and Muff. Tarns, may you rebuild your homeland in the south. Tarns nodded. He fitted his white wolf warghost helmet on, reached into the air, and produced a golden whistle. He blew, and with a wind and a flash, the spirit steed Torride arrived. Bilbo watched with wide eyes. It's so magical, Bilbo breathed. Is this the spirit steed you mentioned? It even has horns. May I touch it? Tarnus smiled. He fastened the pack to Toretti's saddle. Of course, Toretti is gentle. Perhaps it understands a little of what you say. Bilbo approached and stroked the steed's neck. Toretti bent its head for the attention and gently took an apple Bilbo offered. Bilbo laughed with delight. If all horses were like this, I'd ride out myself. Tarnus patted Toretti and looked at Bilbo. That day may come, Bilbo. When I have rebuilt my home, I'll ride Toretti to fetch you. We'll see the world together. Bilbo nodded eagerly. I'll wait here in Hobbiton for your invitation. Before mounting, Tarns remembered his gratitude. He closed his hand, and a pendant set with 4 red amber stones and a brass dagger with a blade carved in plant motifs appeared as if by magic. He knelt and presented them to Bilbo. These are for you, Tarns said. The red amber pendant will help your health and make you less likely to fall ill. The brass dagger is a protective weapon from my homeland, one carried by the Golden Tree's family. If you ever face trouble, use this dagger to come to my land. Its people will help you. Be careful, it's very sharp. Tarns had had spare weapons upgraded by a blacksmith named Hugh when he had time in the lands between. The brass dagger was one such weapon, polished and finely made. Bilbo accepted the gifts, a dagger long enough to serve as a one-handed sword for a hobbit, and promised he would treasure them. Tarns mounted Toretti, nodded a final farewell, and said, Farewell, my eternal friend Bilbo Baggins. May the Golden Tree watch over you. Farewell, and may your journey be smooth, Mr. Tarns, Bilbo called after him. Toretti bore Tarns down the Hobbiton lane until the rider became a silhouette among hedgerows and trees. Bilbo watched until they vanished, and his blessing flew after them on the breeze. Chapter 3. Eat My Lightning Pot. Orcs, Third Age, March 2939. 2 years, 1 month, and 25 days still stood between now and the Lonely Mountain expedition, something Bilbo Baggins did not know. After saying farewell to Bilbo and leaving Hobbiton, Tarns followed the map he had been given and headed south along the Brandywine River. He had been on the road for 5 days. The closer he came to Minhiriath on the map, the more sparsely populated the land became. This world was not as peaceful as he had imagined. Twice already, he had run into hostile bands, humanoid creatures riding wargs, dark gray-skinned and ugly, who fired arrows on sight and gave him no chance to parley. Their fight-on-sight brutality felt oddly familiar, like something out of the lands between. Tarns swung his greatsword and cut those filthy creatures and their wargs into pulp. When more than half their number fell, the rest tried to flee. Toretti, his spirit steed, showed the advantage of speed. The horse caught up and tore down the last 3 fleeing attackers. The pursuit, however, carried Tarns away from the Brandywine and onto a rolling plain of green grass. He was no longer sure where he was on the map. The skirmishes had taught him some useful things. First, his body felt unchanged from his time in the lands between. His physical condition was the same. Second, his magic and prayers still worked and with the same strength. But his cerulean flask was empty. Aside from the star fragments he carried and consumed one by one, he had no reliable way to restore magic during combat. That was why he relied on Toretti's mobility instead of blasting every enemy from a distance. Finally, the Elden Ring inside him would not fully respond. He could summon it for a moment, then it would fade. It felt less like unwillingness and more like a requirement. The ring needed him to stand on a particular land, Minhiriath, just as Iluvatar had said in his dream. Now, looking around, Tarns felt lost. Beyond the bodies he had left behind lay only an open sky and a sea of young grass, dotted with low mounds, grayish-white stones, and a few sparse ancient trees. The ground rolled in gentle undulations. No swamps to worry about, thankfully, for even a spirit steed could be made uncomfortable by mire. Toretti trotted with soft clip-clops, while Tarns studied Bilbo's map for landmarks. When the sun reached its zenith, he steered the horse into a small grove, planning to eat some dried rations. As he neared the trees, the clang of metal struck his ears, the barking language of the orcs he'd met earlier, the low snarls of wargs, and other voices he didn't recognize. Hadn't Iluvatar promised he would understand the tongues of this world? Tarns frowned. He dismissed Toretti back into the whistle and crept toward the grove on foot. In such close, tangled terrain, the greatsword would be cumbersome. Instead, he drew the more versatile combination he trusted in tight quarters, a a fully upgraded King's Army straight sword in his right hand and a brass shield in his left. He moved through vines and brush, wary of traps, and listened. "Damn orcs! Roll back like dogs and beg your masters," someone shouted. Clear enough. A heavy blow smashed into bone, followed by a warg's whine. Another voice, thick with phlegm, spat an answer, threats that the wargs would eat brains and crush skulls. Tarns crouched behind a wide trunk and peered through the leaves. On one side stood the creatures he had seen before, orc riders on wargs. Opposing them were a people he had never met, shorter than men, stockier, with long, bushy beards that nearly swallowed their chins. Dwarves. He'd heard enough to know the ugly riders were called orcs, and these tough, bearded folk were dwarves. 5 dwarves held a small clearing. One lay wounded and protected by the other 4, who raised shields and brandished axes and warhammers. The orcs outnumbered them. Aside from 7 or 8 corpses of orcs and wargs strewn about, Tarns counted 11 orcs and 7 wargs still fighting. The orcs were tactical, splitting into 2 groups. One kept distance and shot arrows to pin the dwarves. The other, supported by wargs, pressed in with spears and blades so the dwarves couldn't lift shields in time. It was effective. 2 dwarves took wounds when their shields failed and went down. One of the remaining dwarves, however, was different. Shorter bearded and a bit taller and sturdier than the others, he moved with surprising agility. Bloodshot-eyed and gritting his teeth, he swung a war axe and cleanly beheaded 2 orcs and cleaved a warg in 2. His ferocity kept the fighting from turning all at once. Tarns couldn't stand by. If he didn't act, the dwarves would be slaughtered, but he wouldn't rush in blindly. On the open plain, he'd relied on Torete's mobility. Here, on unfamiliar confined ground, reckless moves would only bring unnecessary harm. He had learned that the hard way in the lands between. He reached into the air and from his spatial pack produced 2 small ceramic pots. Their surfaces flickered with blue lightning. He felt the weight of them in his hands for a moment, throwing items, volatile and dangerous. He tucked one under his arm and readied the other. "Eat my lightning pot, orcs," Tarns shouted, and launched the first pot toward the closest cluster of wargs and riders. Chapter 4. Thorin Oakenshield. The orcs weren't as quick as the wargs they rode. The wargs heard the sound of the thrown lightning pots, Tarns's, yet did not understand what they were. Not for want of curiosity, but because no one in these parts had any concept of explosion yet. The pots landed about a meter in front of the orc captain, rather than striking him directly. One warg, thinking to mock the thrower for his poor aim, didn't bother to move. The orc captain only noticed when the pots hit the ground and made a cracking noise. By the time he turned, golden lightning was already tearing through the broken clay and lashing outward. Sst! 2 blasts of lightning struck in quick succession. The golden arcs, like venomous snakes, coiled around the unsuspecting orcs and wargs nearby, shredding flesh and scattering bodies with the sick, metallic smell of burned blood. Those 2 pots alone wiped out 5 orcs, including the captain, and 3 wargs. The archer orcs behind the captain had been clustered together, aiming at the dwarves, and Tarns's throne traps had cut them down at a stroke. Even Tarns had been surprised at the carnage. He'd never expected an enemy to see a thrown pot and simply stand there. He breathed inwardly, then refocused on the survivors. Only 3 orcs and 3 wargs remained. The others, not at the center of the lightning's reach, had been terrified by the sudden, gruesome death of their leader and had broken into a panic. They peered left and right for the attacker, but Tarns had slipped into the trees and was well hidden. The 3 wargs sniffed the air, hunting for scent, but the charred stench of their companions overpowered everything. They only picked up the odor of scorched bodies. The 2 dwarves who had been fighting these orcs did not wait to see who their mysterious savior might be. They roared and charged. "You outnumbered us just now, so I fought cautiously," the short-bearded dwarf seemed to say with his actions. "Now that you're so few, we won't stand back." He swung his warhammer like a flying mallet, beheads, severed necks, bodies cleft at the waist, and in an instant the panicked orcs and wargs were cleanly dispatched by him alone. Tarns kept watch for a few more moments, but he was no idle observer either. He stepped from behind a large tree near the remaining enemies. His King's Army straight sword cut through an orc's neck, and his brass shield took the bite of a warg and the assault of its reeking breath. The warg that attacked him howled and fell. Tarns withdrew his blade from the animal's throat and flicked the blood off. At the same time, the final warg's skull split beneath a warhammer. The dwarves and Tarns finished the fight together. Silence settled. The short-bearded dwarf cursed at one of the fallen wargs in a language Tarns did not understand, then raised his head and inclined it toward Tarns. His expression was solemn, grateful. "Thank you for your help, brave human friend. These damned orcs have been moving over a wider area lately. The tracks reach even here." Tarns straightened and sheathed his sword, slinging the brass shield across his back as he walked over to the wounded party. "It was nothing," he said, "but it's not time for thanks. Let me see your companion's wounds." The short-bearded dwarf darted back to 3 of his comrades lying on the ground. Anxiety flitted across their faces, then a faint ease, and then a deeper frown. Tarns knelt and inspected them. None had been mortally wounded. "If it weren't for you, my kin might already be gone," the short-bearded dwarf breathed, and he and another able dwarf set to work treating their fellows. All 3 had been struck by arrows. Tarns guessed they had been ambushed in the forest, one felled by a sneak shot, the others rallying to protect him. "Careful," the short-bearded dwarf murmured as he tugged an arrow from a thigh. The injured dwarf cried out, but when the bolt was free, a darker problem showed itself. The wound bled a blackish blood. "Those orc arrows are poisoned," the dwarf swore. "We didn't bring herbs. We must get back to the Blue Mountains fast, or the poison will eat them away." Tarns leaned nearer and studied the wounds. "I may have an emergency remedy," he said. The short-bearded dwarf looked surprised at the helmeted human. Tarns made a small grabbing motion. A warm, softly glowing stone appeared in his hand. It was a warm stone. He had seen and used such things before. It could spend a point of his focus to trigger the 2 fingers, prayer within, bathing its surroundings in a soft, sun-like heat that eased pain and mended flesh. Tarns tossed the warm stone beside the 3 wounded dwarves and felt a small pull on his magic. The stone gave off a heartening warmth. The pale faces of the poisoned dwarves relaxed as a faint, golden light spread through them, the same light from the stone. The short-bearded dwarf's eyes widened. "What ore is that? I've never seen such a stone in Middle-earth. Where did you find it?" "It's not common," Tarns answered, amused, "but not unheard of." He reached into his pack and produced 3 small green pellets. They were poison moss, an antidote Tarns had kept on him after past encounters, made from herba, cave moss, and dragonfly heads. They were crude but effective against many venoms. He handed them to the short-bearded dwarf, who gave them to the injured ones. "Stop staring and take the antidote," Tarns added. One of the wounded grimaced after swallowing. "It tastes like moss and some green herb with a fishy insect smell," he complained. The short-bearded dwarf checked the wound. Where it had bled black, the color was turning bright red again. "At least it's working. The poison's clearing." "Wait, your leg?" The dwarf looked down and blurted, "What is this? Is my leg healing already?" The small wound, barely a minute before, was knitting surprisingly fast. The warm stone's healing shouldn't have been that quick, Tarns thought, but perhaps these dwarves had never seen one. Under their eager, astonished gazes, the gold in the warm stone faded and it became an ordinary, pale pebble. "The stone's prayer has been spent," Tarns explained. "How do you all feel?" They stood and moved experimentally. The dwarf who'd been complaining of pain smiled. "Much better. Your things are remarkable. I never thought I'd see a wizard who wears armor." He looked Tarns over with a new curiosity. "Are you going to the Blue Mountains? We are too, oddly enough. Won't you come with us back so we can properly thank you?" Tarns thought of Bilbo's confusion at magic. Wizards in this world seemed to be a familiar notion. He didn't correct them. "My destination is Minhiriath, not the Blue Mountains," he said. "Our routes don't match." The short-bearded dwarf frowned. "Minhiriath? Why go to that wild wood, ruined by war?" A dwarf behind Thorin added a warning. "Since the citizens of Cardolan were stricken by plague and the floods came, Minhiriath has turned into a desolate forest. There is no sign of people. Only orcs, wargs, and bands of brigands hide there. Lord Wizard, even with great sorcery, it is unsafe to go alone." "I appreciate the warning," Tarns replied, "but I have a task I must accomplish there." Thorin, who had stepped forward to introduce himself properly, lifted a hand to quiet his companion. He dusted his somewhat fine black attire, set his chin, and said to Tarns, "Wizards are true to their quests. Once they decide, they go." He then removed his warhammer and handed it to Tarns. It was a dwarf's hammer, writ small for a human hand but heavy with craftsmanship. Runes were carved along its head. "If you need anything forged, find me in the Blue Mountains. With this hammer I will help as I can," Thorin offered. Tarns took the hammer with a soft, grateful tone. "I wish you safe travels," he said. Thorin nodded and stepped back with his company. "I am Thorin Oakenshield," he added before he left, "and it is an honor, wizard. Thank you again." "I am Tarnished," Tarns answered. "You may call me Tarns. A hobbit friend once gave me that name." Thorin glanced once more at the now dull stone at their feet. "You wizards have many strange things. I have seen glowing stones before, but never one that heals and glows both." "Then you're very welcome," Tarnan said. Thorin and the other 4 dwarves fell into a quick, courteous farewell, and they departed toward the Blue Mountains. With Thorin's directions and the dwarves' confirmation of the roads, Tarns set off again in the right general direction. He left the small clearing, his mind already on Minhiriath and the mission that drew him there. Chapter 5. The Seed of the Golden Tree. After saying farewell to Thorin and the 4 dwarves, Tarns resumed his journey toward Minhiriath. He met dozens of orc attacks along the way, but he no longer gave chase to fleeing enemies as he once had. He simply moved on. Those orcs and wargs who escaped spread stories about him. Among their kind, it came to be said that on the road to Minhiriath rode a human knight in white wolf armor, mounted on a horned warhorse that seemed to command the wind, wielding an enormous greatsword and cutting orcs and wargs to pieces without effort. Small bands dared not stand against him, and if larger forces pressed the attack, he would answer with sorcery and slaughter them. The tale made Tarns sound more terrifying with every retelling. Human merchants who captured orcs heard 1 or 2 of these tales and carried them back to the towns, but the people of the human realms treated them as little more than rumors. A brave Dunedain ranger had appeared near Minhiriath. Tarns would have been amused to know it. After all, the orcs and wargs had been the first to attack him. When they fled, they were the ones who invented the legends. A fortnight after leaving the dwarves, Tarns crossed the Brandywine River and at once felt the Elden Ring stir within him. In that half-seen realm, something whispered that this was the place where he might rebuild his homeland, the lands between. Toretti snorted, a very human sound, as if it shared its master's quiet joy. Tarns stroked the horse's neck, tamping down his excitement. "Not yet, Torite," he murmured. "We still need to learn more about this land." Bilbo's map had marked the Brandywine as the border of Minhiriath, and borders were the last places he would choose to raise a new realm. Tarns followed the river for a day, then turned east toward the interior. Minhiriath was as the dwarves had described, a land overrun by green, where nature had smothered the traces of an older human age. After 2 days' travel, he halted before a ruined city carved into rock. Once it had been proud and populous, now collapsed walls and toppled towers were braided with dark vines, and distant roars of wild beasts echoed from within. Still, Tarns thought it promising. A site chosen for a city once must have good geography. He rode Toreti in a full reconnaissance around the ruins, a circuit that took him until dusk, and learned the lay of the land. To the east, a small river ran, likely a tributary of the Brandywine. The surrounding ground was mostly flat. Faded, grass-choked roads still marked old roads, evidence that while repairs would be necessary, transport was possible. He patted Toreti and rode into the ruins. Expecting orcs or bandits, Tarns kept sharp watch, but apart from wolves, there were no serious threats. When a pack confronted him, the lead wolf caught the faint scent of blood on him, the kind left by orcs and wargs, bared its teeth, gave a few low warnings, and then, tail tucked, led the pack away. They were not the same breed as the warlike wargs that had attacked him earlier. Otherwise, Tarns would have pursued them and taught them what it meant to cross a Tarnished. At the heart of the ruined city, he found a shallow, overgrown pit where a structure had once stood. It was exactly what he was looking for. Tarns dismounted, stroked Toreti's forehead, and approached the pit. A golden glow rose from his chest as the Elden Ring coalesced. In that ethereal place, architectural visions flashed through his mind. Stormvale Castle, the Caria Academy, Volcano Manor, and beneath them, the names of foes he had faced there, even defeats of fellow tarnished and demigods. The images were dim, and when his spirit reached for them, there was no response. Then a thought came from deep inside him: plant the golden tree first. The visions shifted, resolving into a single object, a seed of the golden tree. It looked different from the dim, dying seeds he had plucked from the small, illusory trees in the lands between. This one was bright, vibrant, full of life. Tarns let his spirit touch the seed, and the next moment it was in his hand. The Elden Ring floated to the center of the pit, and the seed drifted with it to the soil. The moment the seed touched earth, its form melted away and it sank, drinking deep of the ground as roots took hold. A golden shoot pushed through the loam and trembled toward Tarns like a joyful greeting. The ring, glowing with the same light, drifted back to him, circled once, then sank into the top of the sapling. The golden shoot grew rapidly into the rough shape of a tree, but stopped when it reached about Tarnas's knee. He understood at once, this was only the beginning. If the golden tree was to flourish, it would take careful tending. This sapling, fragile and bright, now carried his hope for rebuilding the lands between. Chapter 6. Gandalf the Grey. Tarns stared at the knee-high golden tree sapling and fell into deep thought. Now that it was planted, all it needed was to be nurtured, but he had no idea how. In the lands between, the golden tree had stood full-grown long before he ever arrived. It had never needed anyone to tend it. Even if he asked Marika, the Eternal Queen, she might not have an answer. He took off the helmet of the White Wolf war ghost, and the fresh night air, heavy with the scent of grass and stone, eased his head. The last sliver of sun sank below the horizon, and the moon rose, silvering the ruins. Tarns drew a slow breath, sat cross-legged beside the shallow pit, and stared blankly at the sapling as his thoughts wandered. Torete, nearby, lowered its head and licked at the weeds. Tarnas sifted through memories, the symbols in the ruined halls, the inscriptions on the stone tablets in Marika's bedchamber in Rodel City. The golden tree he had planted lacked the elden beast he had seen back in the lands between. He wasn't some unseen greater will that could summon giants, and besides, the elden beast wasn't strictly necessary for the tree's growth. The elden ring it had guarded was already inside the sapling. Perhaps he should treat it as an ordinary plant and water it. But what should he use? A crisp clip of hooves startled him. Someone rode through the silent city ruins, not heavily laden, neither hurrying nor dawdling. Tarn's mind catalogued the situation quickly. In the moonlit wreckage, his sapling was the only source of light. Any rider would be heading that way. He thought not to assume malice, but to be cautious. He reached out and, with a practiced motion, summoned a staff inlaid with deep purple glintstone, the meteorite staff he had found in the sage's town of the Aeonia Swamp early in his travels. With his other hand, he drew the hunting god greatsword that had accompanied the White Wolf war ghost. The golden tree had just begun to grow. He would guard it. If the rider meant harm, Tarnis would not be stingy with his magic. Given more time, he could prepare far worse surprises. Moonlight made the approaching figure faintly visible. Tall and lean, he rode a horse and wore a pointed wizard's hat and a loose gray robe, holding a staff in one hand and the reins in the other. A wizard. Tarna's eyes narrowed. An unfamiliar wizard anywhere demanded full attention. As he prepared to swap to weapons better against sorcery, the rider spoke. "I am not your enemy. Are you the White Wolf Knight the orcs speak of? My name is Gandalf. I have been looking for you for almost a month." Tarnas did not lower his guard. If Gandalf stepped closer, the blade of the hunting god greatsword began burn with black and white flame. Gandalf read the warning, pulled his reins, and the horse whinnied to a halt. The old wizard raised his voice until it carried across the ruin. "Although I do not know why you are wary, I respect your caution. I only wish to speak." Tarnas answered, keeping the staff ready. "What do you want to say? This is hardly a picturesque spot, and you're alone at night. Aren't you afraid of thieves?" If a wizard feared thieves, Gandalf said with a hint of amusement, I would not have spent the last month searching for you. He relaxed. I first went to Hobbiton in the Shire. You know a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins? Tarnas paused. Bilbo? Gandalf chuckled. Of course, I'm familiar with the hobbits of Hobbiton. I go there to set off fireworks at their festivals. Bilbo is special. He has the sort of curiosity that makes him dream of leaving home. It was he who told me your name. He smiled faintly. About a month ago, I saw a golden meteor fall in the west of Middle-earth and set out to find it. The meteor landed in Hobbiton. The person it brought was you, wasn't it, Mr. Tarns? Hearing Bilbo's name eased some of Tarns's suspicion. Only someone who knew the hobbits well would know Bilbo's contradictory love of adventure and home. I'll tentatively take your word for it, wizard, Tarns said, but I can't let you approach now. You come at a bad time. If it were daytime, or even an hour earlier, I would gladly talk. Very well, Gandalf said. I only wish to speak. This distance will do, though it's a pity we lack a warm fire, good wine, and some cheese and bread. His blue eyes studied the golden glow of the sapling behind Tarns. Consider this my apology, Tarns said. I'll make it up to you. Come back in 3 days. I'll welcome you then. Tarns felt 3 days would give him time to work out how to tend the sapling and make it less vulnerable. Gandalf read the refusal in his tone and bowed to it. Agreed. At noon 3 days from now, I'll wait here at a distance, if that will do. As long as you don't come close before then, Tarns said, unless you're planning traps under my nose. Both fell silent. Tarns sheathed the hunting god greatsword, but kept the meteorite staff in hand. Gandalf dismounted, cleared a flat stone nearby, and sat with the casual air of someone who had no fear of the night or the wolf cries that echoed now and then. He produced a pipe, cleaned its mouthpiece, packed in some tobacco that smelled faintly dry, and Ring, glinting on his right index finger, struck a small flame to it. He lit the pipe and began to smoke, leisurely and contented. Tarns watched for a moment, then rummaged in Toraday's pack. He found a piece of richly milky cheese and a smoky, meaty sausage. Hey, catch! He tossed them toward Gandalf. Gandalf calmly set his staff down, caught both pieces with one hand while still holding the pipe in his mouth, and examined them with a pleased expression. Hobbiton cheese and sausage, he said loudly. Perfect for a late-night snack. I shan't go to sleep hungry tonight. Tarns let his thoughts return to the sapling. The golden tree in the lands between gave blessings. Could he use blessings to nourish this sapling? He had the answer on hand. A collection of golden runes sat in his spatial pouch. Chapter 7. I will stir up a storm and blow away the filth in the wind for you. Golden runes were the residual golden afterglow of the golden grace bestowed on the inhabitants of the lands between. In simple terms, they were a form of energy blending life and soul, gifts once generously granted by the golden tree to the golden lineage. Now, those same runes could be used to cultivate a new golden tree, a cyclical rebirth of that power. These thoughts ran through Tarns's mind as small golden orbs began to appear in his palm, one after another. Each orb was composed of countless tiny particles. Their brightness and depth of color varied because every member of the golden lineage had received a different measure of golden grace. The runes dropped from their bodies after death, therefore differed too. The more grace a rune held, the closer it came to pure gold. In the distance, Gandalf was idly using the ring of fire on his finger to light a fire and roast the sausage Tarns had tossed him. But when Tarns took the golden runes from his spatial pack, Gandalf's attention sharpened. He watched the glowing motes in Tarns's hand, curious and thoughtful, until the smell of burnt meat snapped him back. He moved the blackened sausage off the embers, took a puff on his pipe, and watched the orbs. What is that? Soul? Magic? No, neither, Gandalf muttered, smoke clouding his blue eyes. I've never seen energy so alive. Is this something from his homeland? He held his questions in reserve, planning to ask them once the other man had finished. He had originally only wanted to greet the golden star that had fallen from the sky and see whether it was friend or foe. But everything Tarns revealed so far had only deepened his curiosity. He would have a long conversation with this stranger. Tarns suddenly crushed the runes in his palm. With a sound like breaking glass, the particles drifted down through his fingers toward the sapling of the golden tree. The sapling pulled them in eagerly. Its body shimmered, and visibly it began to grow, shooting upward, sprouting new branches and fresh leaves. Seeing the runes work, Tarns produced even more, this time including hero runes and a few rare king's runes, the types closest to pure gold. Hero runes fell from those who had ridden on battlefields. King's runes came from those who bore a kingly fate, now made ethereal after the Elden Ring shattered. Even Tarns had only a handful of King's runes, a reminder of their scarcity. Nevertheless, the golden tree could consume them all. The second wave of crushed runes accelerated the sapling's growth. Tarns emptied his spatial pack entirely. The tree shot from knee height up to 2 heads taller than him. Its trunk swelled as thick as a person's body and shone with a faint golden light. Golden leaves blanketed the branches, strands of gleaming silk dangling between them. The night breeze ran through the foliage and the leaves rustled like laughter. Tarns couldn't help the small smile that crossed his face. The sapling had finally outgrown the name sapling and become a young tree. It still looked no larger than any ordinary adult tree, but Tarns knew the truth. Having seen the true form of the golden tree, he understood that this was not even 1% the size of the smaller golden trees that grew throughout the lands between. It was only a beginning. Yet it was no longer vulnerable as an unprotected seedling. It could draw nutrients from the earth, convert them into golden grace, and return that life to the surrounding land. The golden grass that now shimmered around the tree proved that. Tarns pressed his hand against the thick trunk and felt the hard bark under his palm. At that density, ordinary iron tools would struggle to chip it. If it had another month of normal growth, it might reach 10 meters and be immune to all but divine flames, just as the golden tree in the lands between. To match that true tree, however, would take decades. The golden tree there loomed across the skies no matter where you stood. Gandalf watched, visibly moved. The tree's beauty tugged at memories of Lothlorien, an image of brilliance and tranquility before he had come to Middle-earth. Golden light reflected in his wise eyes as his thoughts briefly drifted to the future. Beautiful, bright, full of life, he murmured. In some measure, Middle-earth's future has been decided by you, Mr. Tarns. Tarns, already turning inward, linked his mind to the Elden Ring embedded within the tree. The faint image on the ring brightened. He first touched the projected image of the royal capital, Leyndell. If any place in the lands between would shelter and protect a golden tree, Leyndell would be perfect. But when he selected it, a new interface appeared. One option read like a summoning command to recreate the entire city of Rodell, only it was dimmed and unavailable. The golden grace inside the tree still wasn't enough to restore an entire city. His gaze moved to another option, First Round Table Hold. A string of names flared in his mind, faces he knew. Fia, Deathbed Companion, Sir Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing, Mad-Tongue Alberich, Old Knight Istvan, Great Horn Tragoth, Juno Hoslow, Knight of Blood, the Royal Remains, White Wolf War Ghost, Witch Hunter Jaren. And at the bottom, 2 names that made his chest tighten as if thunder and beasts echoed in his ears. Vike, Knight of the Round Table. Bernal, Knight of the Round Table. All the First Round Table Hold names were lit. They could be summoned. He had just fed the golden tree a great many hero and lord's runes. There was enough grace to call forth 2 Round Table Knights. Yet Tarns did not assume they would obey him. Unless he could also summon the Finger Maidens bound to Vike and Bernal, their loyalty would be uncertain. The first Round Table Hold was a different matter. Except for Fia and Ensha, about whom he knew little, the other knights had been defeated by him in earlier cycles. Their memories would reset with a new cycle in the lands between, but Tarns could not be sure those resets applied here. He shook his head. Rather than gamble on the Round Table Hold, he wanted allies who had always stood by him through cycles, people from Nimfor and Liornia of the Lakes. He planned to find them later. Still, he stayed inside Leyndell's image and scrolled further. Names like Morgoth, the Omen King, Godfrey, First Elden Lord, Radon, the Golden Order, and Marika, the Eternal Queen, glowed dim and inaccessible, locked behind the requirement to recreate Rodell. Even ordinary soldiers and knights of Rodell couldn't be summoned until the city itself was made real. Why, he wondered, could the First Round Table Hold be summoned directly while Rodell needed to be recreated first? Then, realization struck. Although the Round Table Hold lay within Rodell, Its true location was not in the physical city, but within the Great Runes, outside the real space map of the lands between. The Great Runes were linked intrinsically to the Golden Tree and the Elden Ring. If the Round Table Hold's people could be called, then those he had met inside the Great Runes should be summonable too. Among them was someone who, in every cycle, pledged her loyalty to him and whose strength stood ready to meet Godfrey on the battlefield. The Elden Ring sensed Tarns's thought. Its image flipped and settled on the warrior he expected. Her name shone bright. She could be called. "Come, bring your battle axe, thunder, and storm. Fight beside me once more," Tarns willed in his mind. The golden tree's leaves trembled in the evening breeze. Golden light gathered and descended beside him, coalescing into a valiant, striking woman. With shoulder-length black hair, healthy wheat-colored skin, and crimson eyes, she wore barbarian leathers that revealed a sculpted torso and powerful limbs. She knelt on one knee before Tarns, one hand on the haft of the great battle-axe at her waist. "Though I do not know where this place is, if you still need me, my eternal friend, my king, I will come. My wings will unfurl for you. My thunder will clear your path, and my storm will destroy all who stand against you. I will stir up storms to blow away the defilement in the wind. Storm King Nephili Lu answering the king's call. I come." Chapter 8. Rogia. That's my name clatter. From a distance, Gandalf was so shocked he dropped his pipe. It skittered across the ground, and only then did he wince. The tobacco in it was top-grade Shire grown. He had been composed while watching Tarns, but when Tarns performed a live transformation right before him, Gandalf's calm disappeared. Even more startling was that Tarnis's expression was so natural and his soul apparently intact. Gandalf needed time to think about how to approach him. Tarns, however, didn't notice Gandalf's inner turmoil. He took the axe embossed with a stormhawk carving that Nephili Lu had held up, helped her to her feet, and said, "Nephili, I'm glad to fight alongside you again. How's your memory? Have you remembered anything, like reliving the same things over and over?" He wanted to confirm something. If Nephili's memories included previous cycles, then others summoned later might share those cycle memories too. Nephili gave a wry smile, stroked her forehead, and answered, "If you mean our meeting at Stormvale Castle, your help in resolving my knots with my adoptive father, and my swearing allegiance to you against Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. Yes, I remember. It seems there were 8 cycles." She looked at Tarns with new respect. "With those memories, I admire you more than ever. If I were in your place, I'd have gone mad by the 3rd, maybe the 4th cycle. That helplessness, when nothing you do changes the outcome, can drive a person insane." Tarns cleared his throat, a little embarrassed by the praise. "That's exaggerated. In the 6th cycle, I chose to become Lord of the Mad Flame. I was nearly delirious then." Nephili shook her head. "The memories that flooded back just now say that in the 7th and 8th cycles you resealed the Mad Flame and with the gold mask found the rune of the perfect order. You wouldn't have done that unless you loved the lands between." No, what I truly loved wasn't the lands between itself, Tarns thought. It was a girl in that land who chose to sacrifice herself. Because of her, he had fallen in love with the place. He hadn't summoned her immediately because her name might not even appear on the list. Her soul no longer existed. He smiled faintly. "Anyway, we've left the lands between. Let those memories stay with us." Nephili nodded and glanced up at the golden tree behind them. Her crimson eyes studied it. "Is this the golden tree? It's much smaller than I remember." "I just planted it," Tarns said. "I summoned you because I need someone to guard it with me, but I also need to summon others." Nephili didn't ask who he intended to call. She took the axe back and moved to stand beside him. "Too bad my hawk didn't come with me. It could have scouted from the air," she said, half joking. "I won't forget it," Tarns replied with a smile. Nephili began to look around. The city they stood in was swallowed by time. She had only taken a few steps when her sharp eyes found a distant bonfire and Gandalf sitting beside it, watching. She frowned and asked Tarnis, "Is that old man over there a friend of yours?" "He's a friend of a friend," Tarnis said. "We can trust him not to do anything harmful for now. Let him sit. I agreed to have a proper talk with him later." Nephili glanced at Gandalf and in lieu of words gave him a faint nod. Gandalf, full of questions, could only nod back. Tarns was busy. Tarns sensed the Golden Tree's Elden Ring still had enough power left to summon more. Nefili, having the memories of 8 cycles, reassured him that it had been the right decision not to summon the people from Round Table Hold right away. If they'd appeared remembering being killed by him, the reunion could have been ugly, especially with near Lord-tier tarnished like Vike and Bernal. The next person Tarns planned to call might not match Nefili in combat prowess, but he was no less dear to Tarns, the kindest, gentlest man who had helped him first in the lands between, Rogier, the sorcerer. Rogier had died searching for the truth about the Black Knife Knight. Like Nefeli before him, Rogier materialized in golden motes beside Tarns. He tipped the brim of his pointed sorcerer's hat, the blue feather in it catching the light, and revealed clear blue eyes. "I feel as if I've awakened from an eternal slumber, but I suppose I don't need to reintroduce myself," he said with a wry tone. "And I'm not the first to arrive, am I?" He gave Nefeli a polite nod. "It's an honor to meet you, Child of the Storm." Hearing his dear friend's voice, Tarns brightened. He pulled a finely decorated rapier from his pack, its hilt set with an oval ruby, and handed it forward. "Better use your own weapon. It doesn't feel right in my hands." Rogier caught the rapier, twirled it with practiced ease, and grinned. "Sharper than I expected." "That's because its battle skill helped me a lot. I had Old Man Hugh reinforce it a few times," Tarns said. Rogier felt the rapier's near-perfect tempering and didn't press the point. Instead, he reached out a hand, solemn. "I'm back." Tarns inhaled deeply and clasped Rogier's hand firmly. "Welcome back," he said, shaking it vigorously. As Rogier's summoning finished, the Elden Ring notified Tarnans that he could summon no one more, not until the Golden Tree had time to grow. That was fine. With Nefeli and Rogier at his side, he had 2 reliable friends and warriors. He could wait patiently for the tree to grow. The problem of lacking elite companions was solved. Now it was time to deal with the orcs. The night wind was cool, and the Golden Tree glowed like a second moon. Its golden light washed over the ruin, outshining the pale moonlight as Tarns, Nefeli, and Rogier worked to clear the ivy and weeds from the surrounding stone buildings. Most of the structures here had been abandoned rather than shattered, so if the overgrowth and vermin could be driven out, they could be used again. If not, they'd have to camp beneath the Golden Tree. "If you don't mind, I can help," Gandalf said when he saw Tarns at work. "I don't much fancy sleeping on the grass either. A warm house to shelter from wind and rain would be welcome." He glanced up at the clear night sky and grinned. "Though it doesn't look like rain tonight." "Tough nights aren't good for the old," Tarns replied, his voice carrying in the quiet. "I appreciate the offer. We'll clear an extra room for you to rest in, then you can take shelter." Gandalf puffed on his pipe and stood lightly. "Old? Any old man wouldn't be riding alone through Minhiriath, Mr. Tarns, and a wizard clears weeds faster than most. Don't underestimate me." He tapped his gray robe for emphasis, then raised his staff and pointed it at a nearby stone cottage, its walls matted with vines. White light flowed from the staff's tip. The vines loosened and crawled away from the stones. The weeds burrowed back into the earth. Within minutes, the cottage's facade was revealed, clean and sound. "Very practical glintstone magic," Rogier said with a wry smile. "Quite different from the magics of the lands between." Tarns nodded, watching the wizard at work. When Gandalf finished, he gathered the firewood beside the bonfire and ducked into the cottage. Soon the windows glowed with flame. He emerged and beckoned them in. "Come inside. The house is big enough, and there's much I should tell you." Nefeli shook her head. "You two go on in and talk. I'll stay and keep watch over the Golden Tree. I'm not much for talk." "Persuasion is simple," Rogier offered with a faint smile. "If you like, I could teach you some techniques. Language is an art." "No thanks." Nefeli's red eyes were blunt. "I prefer my axe. My foster father tried to teach me words. He gave up. I'd rather kill an enemy with an axe than try to talk him to death." Rogier looked momentarily lost for a reply. Tarns laughed and patted the swordsman's shoulder. Taking Toretti's reins, he led the way into the cottage. He didn't return the spirit steed's whistle. Instead, he tied the reins outside, took out some dehydrated vegetables, a slab of ham, a water skin, and a small frying pan, and stepped inside. Rogier had already settled by the fire when Gandalf and he exchanged simultaneous greetings. "Good evening," they both said, and then stopped as if apologizing for speaking at once. Rogier waved a hand in an after-you motion. Gandalf chuckled. "Although I have introduced myself to Mr. Tarns, this swordsman has not yet met me. I am Gandalf, a wizard." Rogier bowed slightly, then sat cross-legged by the flames without worrying about the dirt. "I am Rogier. I'm not much of a swordsman either, more a sorcerer in truth." Gandalf smiled. "Nor am I a great swordsman." When Tarnas entered, he set the pan on a few fist-sized stones Gandalf had arranged into a crude hearth and topped it with the frying pan. "May I borrow a spark to cook?" "Of course." Gandalf helped, then watched as Tarns poured cold water into the pan and set it to boil. "If you have questions, now's a good time, Wizard Gandalf," Tarnas said as he worked. "By the way, how is Bilbo? Still holed up in Bag End, writing?" Gandalf's brows twitched. "You needn't keep testing me. You know I mean you no harm. Mr. Tarns, Bilbo has had the idea of writing, but he never set pen to paper, not because he lacks the thought, but because he has to see the world with his own eyes first. He has never truly been outside his window, so how could he write what he hasn't seen?" Rogier smiled. "I apologize for Tarns. He's been through much, he's cautious, but he's a steadfast friend. Once he trusts you, he will not fail you." Gandalf's eyes lit at the mention of gifts. "I believe that. You're the sort who gives friends amber pendants and sharp blades. Bilbo didn't even know the value of the things you gave him. Enough to buy part of the Shire, perhaps, but that pendant can ward off disease and lengthen life. If those greedy folk in the East knew, they'd fight over it." Tarns laughed as the water began to boil. Knowing Bilbo, he probably didn't wear it. He'd leave it on his desk. "He left it on his desk among quills and ink," Gandalf agreed, "and that brass short sword, kept in the cupboard by the door as if it were nothing. Hobbits are a peculiar lot, uninterested in treasure, very interested in food." "It was only a night," Tarns said, "yet he fed me 4 times, supper, a late snack, and 2 breakfasts." They smiled into the fire, and Tarns reached out suddenly. "Forgive me for doubting you, Gandalf." Gandalf took his hand. "No matter. Vigilance is a good quality, and you haven't lost the heart that trusts." He released Tarns's hand and felt something small and cool fall into his palm. Tarnas saw the pendant and explained, "A small compensation. I hope you like it." Gandalf examined the medallion, blue amber set in an ornate brass disc, similar to the one he had seen at Bilbo's. The blue amber medallion, an object from the lands between that could modestly increase the wearer's maximum magic. Gandalf felt the faint power in it. It would sharpen focus and raise magical capacity, benefits he had little use for himself, but that might aid others. He smiled. "You have many strange and useful things, Mr. Tarns. I'm surprised anyone could possess so many." The water hissed. Tarnas dropped the ham into the pan. "There are more surprises ahead. Don't be too startled when you see them." "So," Tarnas said between stirring, "what did you want to tell me?" Gandalf tucked the medallion away and sat forward, his face growing serious. "I meant to ask if you were friend or foe, but that seems clear now, so I need not ask directly." "Why ask that?" Tarns said. "I thought you wanted to know about the golden tree." "Your tree is your secret," Gandalf said. "Everyone has their secrets, and so long as they don't harm Middle-earth, I have no desire to pry. I am curious, but if you do not offer, I will not press. The real reason I asked is that this land is not wholly safe. Darkness lurks beneath the light." Tarns listened coolly at first. Conflict is common enough in the lands between. But Gandalf's next words drew a frown. "The darkness I mean isn't mere quarrels. Deep in this land, true evil breeds. You must have met ugly, terrible orcs. They do not parley. They attack without reason. Evil is their nature. They slake some cruel hunger by killing. They cannot be reasoned with. They will come upon us sooner or later." Rogier's expression hardened. "So, they'll find us." Gandalf nodded. "That is why I must gather allies. If the dark spreads, we will need shelter for the displaced and strength to push back. I came to see whether you were friend or foe because I hoped you would aid Middle-earth." Tarns thought, then asked, "Where are you bound, Gandalf?" "North," Gandalf said, "to the Lonely Mountain. An evil dragon named Smaug slumbers there, the Grandeur. The mountain is the dwarves' home, and I fear Smaug might ally with darker things. If that happens, the North could be plunged into war. If it comes to that, I hope you can help the people rebuild. Tarns cocked his head. An evil dragon? If you know it is there, why not go and slay it yourself? Chapter 10. Orc Night Raid. After Tarns spoke, Gandalf opened his mouth, his beard twitching around his lips, and could not help but say, "If that evil dragon were so easy to kill, the dwarves would not have been homeless for hundreds of years, afraid to return to their halls." Tarns removed his white wolf warghost helmet and set it aside. He took a deep breath of the cold night air, met Gandalf's studying gaze, and spoke seriously. "What the dwarves cannot do does not mean I cannot. You may not believe it, but I have killed many dragons and ancient worms. I have even fought and beaten their kings. If you need me, I will help kill that dragon, even if I go alone." Tarns felt a stab of regret that he had not faced them at their peak, but the memory of fighting ancient dragons like Placidusax and Fortisax still made his heart race, scarlet lightning and fire tearing the sky, the world shaking beneath him. Gandalf took a puff from his pipe and asked, "Perhaps you truly have the power to slay Smaug, Mr. Tarns, but can you be sure one blow will fell him? If not, Smaug's rage will rain down on the people of Lake Town beneath the lonely mountain." He added, "I do not know what the dragons you fought looked like. Smaug is 140 meters long. His scales are like forged steel, and his breath can reduce a man to ash in an instant." Tarns listened without arrogance. Even in the lands between, where he had fought many dragons, he had learned never to underestimate a foe. One moment of carelessness meant scorching flame or crushing fangs. Killing so many had not only been a matter of strength, but of respect for the enemy. After Gandalf finished, he looked at Tarns, expecting him to back down. Tarns surprised him by answering calmly, 140 meters, larger than most I've faced, yes, but size does not frighten me. I promise you, Gandalf, if you call on me, I will give my all to kill it." Gandalf glanced at Rogier, who stood quietly beside them, his look asking, "Is he always this bold?" Rogier smiled. "Tarns's courage is not recklessness. He feels fear like any man, but he fights through it. I watched him grow in the Round Table Hold, once helpless against the veteran knight Alberich, later defeating him." Gandalf chuckled and nodded. "I suppose I know too little of you, Mr. Tarns. I accept your offer. But now is not the time to hunt Smaug. I have not yet learned the full situation in the north. Besides, you and your friends cannot easily leave Minheriath at present, can you?" Tarns understood the unspoken meaning. The golden tree outside still needed guarding, and with too few hands, he could not abandon it. He added more dried vegetables to the broth that already smelled of ham and said, "You're right, Gandalf." "I know your courage and will," Gandalf said. "When the time comes, I will find you." Tarns smiled. "When you return, everything will be different." Gandalf's eyes crinkled. "Then when shall we taste this thick soup? Hobbits are so particular. Bilbo's provisions were chosen with care. In this quiet wilderness, a bowl of hot vegetable soup and good company warms the heart against any cold." He steered the conversation to the simmering pot, and Tarns laughed inwardly at the old man's wit. "It will be a while yet," Tarns told him. "I've made enough for the four of us." Footsteps approached quickly. Nephili Lu knocked on the wall and called in a low voice, drawing the three inside to the doorway. "There's a foul presence on the wind. Something evil approaches." Tarns stopped stirring, glanced regretfully at the nearly finished soup, then knocked over the little stone stove and smothered the fire. He and Rogier exchanged looks, rose, drew their weapons, and stepped out to take watch. Tarns slipped his helmet back on and asked Nephili Lu, "Can you tell where they are coming from?" Nephili extended her right hand and gripped her axe. Moonlight flashed off the blade as she pointed toward the east and the north. "There and there. The wind from those directions carries a bad aura." Rogier held his staff in his left hand and his rapier in his right. "Could they be wild beasts?" he asked. Gandalf, coming out behind them, replied, "Wild beasts would not head toward a light at night. That would make them easy prey." A sudden chorus of long, chilling howls echoed across the ruins. Birds rose and scattered from the overgrown stones in the directions Nephili had indicated. Rogier's brow tightened. "Wolves? They're not ordinary wolves," Nephili said. "These are dangerous kinds. Rogier, ready your glintstone magic." At the howl, Tarns and Gandalf grew grave. Tarnis's expression darkened with bitter familiarity. Gandalf said quietly, "You know what that means, Mr. Tarns." Tarns gave a helpless sort of smile. "Yes, on my way here I was attacked many times by these beasts and by orcs riding them." Rogier, crossing staff and rapier as he set a glintstone damage buff on his blade, asked, "These beasts, are they not wolves? And what are orcs?" Gandalf glanced at the blue light on Rogier's blade. "They are wolves, but wolves bred for darkness, wargs from Gundabad. Where wargs move, orcs follow." He turned to Tarns. "If wargs come, a large band of orcs is near. Were you seen when you passed through here?" Tarns thought. "I didn't meet orcs in these ruins, but earlier I encountered a band and killed most of them before leaving. The ones that fled may have alerted their main force and led them here. Or," he nodded toward the glowing golden tree, "perhaps the light drew them." Gandalf looked at the constant glow of the golden tree, so bright and out of place in the broken city. "Can you dim it? Make it less conspicuous?" Tarns shook his head. "I can't. That is how the tree is." Gandalf sighed. "Then give me a sword. From what you've said, I judge 50 or more orcs and wargs are coming." Nefili stepped forward. "No, hide inside. Those beasts are dangerous. I will not let an old man go to war." Gandalf smiled serenely. "I appreciate your kindness, brave warrior, but I am not merely an old man. A wizard does not stand by while friends are attacked." Tarns produced a one-handed sword from his spatial pack and handed it to Gandalf. "Believe him, Nefili. He's a spellcaster." Tarns leaned to Nefili and whispered, "Keep an eye on him. Many warriors deny their age. Time wins in the end." Nefili barely nodded. Gandalf, who had heard the whisper perfectly well, only smiled and said nothing. His attention fell on the sword. The blade gleamed slender and golden. "This is a holy blade," he murmured. He poured a little of his power into it, and the sword took on a radiant golden light, harmonizing with the glow of the golden tree. The tree itself seemed to respond. Gandalf felt a surge of golden warmth gather on the blade. Tarns explained, "It's called the ceremonial straight sword. It belonged to someone tied to that tree. It can channel the tree's power. Were you curious about the tree? Learn through this blade." The ceremonial straight sword was actually one of a pair, but Tarns noticed Gandalf's habitual grip on his staff and only gave one. Gandalf took a standard sword stance beside him. "Then I shall learn its ways," he began, but stopped, squinting at Tarnis. Tarns had produced a quantity of sky-blue stones that shimmered with unstable magic, cuckoo glintstones. Gandalf watched him hold them, sensing the restless power within. "These will be useful," Tarns said. "There are many of them. We can't meet a large force without planning. I won't use wide-area glintstone blasts. They damage the ground and risk the tree. Rogier, help me bury these in the directions they're coming from." Rogier came over, surprised. "Where did you get so many cuckoo glintstones? You could say I scavenged them," Tarns replied. He dug holes while Rogier poured his magic at each stone. One stone per hole. When a warg stepped on it, it would deliver a nasty surprise. Gandalf looked at Tarns digging in the dirt on the eve of battle and turned to Nefili, asking with a raised brow, "Is he always like this?" Nefili gestured vaguely and conceded, "Everything he does usually proves useful. Those who fight with him get used to his odd ways." They finished burying the glintstones quickly. Tarnis came back to Nefili and Gandalf, a little frustrated. "If I'd had more time, I would have dug deeper." Rogier smiled wryly. "If you'd planted more, my magic would have been drained before the fight began." Tarns patted Rogier's shoulder, then reached into his pack and produced 5 or 6 cracked pots that hummed with golden lightning. He'd used 2 earlier to help some dwarves. These were the remainder. He handed out the lightning pots between Nefili and Gandalf and explained to Gandalf, who had never used them, "Throw them into groups of enemies. Don't throw them too close, or you might hurt yourself or your allies." Gandalf cradled the pots against his chest while still holding staff and sword. "I have not seen such tactics before." Tarnis narrowed his eyes. From the dark beyond the ruins, he already heard the low growls of wargs. "You'll like this style of fighting," he said. "Trust me, Gandalf." They fell into a tense silence, listening to the night. The golden tree's glow painted them in warm light against the ruins' chill. Tarnis, aware that Smaug's size was far greater than the dragons he had faced in the lands between, had not rushed north. The tree needed protecting, and giant worms were not foes to be recklessly pursued. For now, their immediate concern was the wargs and the orcs closing in on the tree's light. Chapter 11. Morgwyn's Sacred Spear. An ugly, vicious creature rode through the night on a warg. Its rotten teeth jutted from cracked lips, blood-stained iron plates were driven into its flesh like armor and decoration, and sparse, withered hair clung to its skull. The orc captain sniffed the air, raised a poorly maintained, rusty blade, and pointed toward the glowing tree not far ahead. "I smell humans. Kill them all. Peel their skin, gouge their organs, eat their flesh, then cut down that tree and bring it back to Dol Guldur for our master." He barked orders in Orcish, spitting foul-smelling saliva into the air. Behind him, wave after wave of orcs thundered past on wargs, howling in excitement. They had no fear of revealing themselves. Orcs believed that noise would intimidate the humans, and they relished the thought of watching terrified faces. The wargs threaded through the ruined buildings and underbrush, bringing the raiding party to the fringe of the golden tree's light. There they hesitated, claws scraping the weed-choked earth, leaving deep gouges. The wargs instinctively recoiled from the tree's illumination, disgusted and nauseated by it. Though the light would not harm them, to creatures of malice it felt as revolting as filth. Still, their bloodlust overcame their revulsion. They surged forward with angry snarls, driven as much by their hatred of the humans who had planted the tree as by hunger. If the night's kill did not fatten them enough, the orc captain's own meat might be offered to them later. The warg's rage kept the raiders moving, and the orcs let loose howls again. Then the sound of other raiders approaching from the north reached them. Orcs do not think in terms of cooperation, only of stealing another group's spoil. The captain snarled at his men, "Faster! Don't let those northern cursors steal our food." He mulled for a moment on betraying the northern raiders and claiming their kills, but the thought dissolved at the image of a tall, white, one-armed figure. If that figure learned of his treachery, he would be killed and fed to the wargs. The captain swallowed, pushed his scheming aside, and focused his cruelty on the humans near the glowing tree. At first, the cries from the north sounded as expected, howls and roars, but then they shifted from eager triumph to confusion and terror. Blue flashes split the sky to the north, followed by the screams of orcs and the whimpers of wargs. A single howl could be written off as ordinary resistance. These came from all across the approaching force. The captain's unease grew. "Slow the march! Stop!" he roared, but the wargs at the front, already agitated by the tree's light, ignored him. The sight of a human in armor running at them only hardened their charge. From the northern edge, several clay pot-like objects arced through the night and landed among the front ranks. Sizzle, and the force of the blast was devastating. Like when Tarns had earlier protected Thorin, these lightning pots were a weapon the orcs did not understand. 3 of them detonated at the front. 5 wargs and the orcs on their backs were blasted into charred corpses by golden lightning, a nauseating scent of burned protein filling the air. Aftershocks left 7 warg riders grievously wounded and paralyzed. The raid stalled. The captain waited then, believing Tarns had no more of the pots, snarled, "He's out of those things. Cowards, go! Archers, shoot!" Tarns counted the enemies left, 11 including the captain. He cursed inwardly that he had no more ancient dragon lightning pots to spare. He had not made many back in the lands between, and most were already used. After this, he thought, he should rummage his pack for materials and make more to be safe. He pulled out a long spear. It looked almost like a giant pitchfork with 3 prongs, but the golden shaft was exquisitely worked and the 3 spearheads seemed perpetually slick with blood. Tarns had many ways to clear a crowd, combat skills, sorcery, and prayers, but he had been conserving magic. Rogier's words echoed in his head. The golden tree's light slowly replenished the magic drained by the cuckoo glintstone. While he stood inside its reach, fear of running out of power no longer constrained him. Still, destructive weapons like the Godslayer or Starscourge greatswords would wreck the ground he intended to build upon. He chose Morgwyn's sacred spear instead, devastating to flesh while leaving the earth largely intact. The orcs gaped at the huge trident as if confirmation Tarns lacked more lightning pots. In their limited experience, A long-handled weapon was useless once enemies closed in without a front line in place. From Tarns's helmet visor, he could see the shaggy brown fur of the lead warg and the grin of its rider. He raised a whistle to his lips. Torrate, larger and more durable than any warg, appeared, rearing and smashing a front hoof into the warg's skull. Crack! The warg's neck snapped cleanly. It did not cry out. It slumped, unconscious, its rider pinned under its bulk. Tarns did not pause to look. He waltzed to Toretti's back and charged straight for the orc captain. He did not hate the captain so much as understand orcish psychology. Kill the leader, and disorder follows. The captain bared his teeth and howled. Cut him to pieces. Orcs and wargs swiveled to block Tarns's retreat. Quick, shoot, the captain barked at the archers. They fumbled for arrows. Before a single shaft could fly, Tarns lifted Morgwyn's sacred spear and drove 2 mock thrusts toward the sky like a ritual. The 3 spearheads burst into blood-red flame, fresh, living crimson that overwhelmed, for a heartbeat, the golden tree's radiance. The crimson wrapped the nearby orcs like a halo of doom. The captain felt it first, the skin on his arms and chest parting as if by invisible knives. Neat, bloody wounds opened all over, black ochre welling and then, impossibly, burning with the spear's crimson light. He screamed, an animal, inhuman scream, and the light did not let his brain slide into shock. Agony flooded him, but consciousness remained, sharpened by the spear's curse. Around him, orcs and wargs howled and whined, grappling with the feeling of being slowly dismembered. The wargs bucked, wrenching their riders free. Some orcs beat their heads against the ground until they became mush. Others, unable to bear the pain, plunged knives into their own bellies. Tarns stood unmoved, and with each of his ceremonial thrusts, the red light swelled. He drove the spear a 3rd time toward the sky, and the air seemed pierced by the point. A torrent of blood poured down like a waterfall. At the 3rd strike, the trapped wounds burst, and the bodies of the surrounding orcs and wargs tore open as if bags of water had been slashed. Black blood flamed crimson, and the raiders died, quiet, broken, and utterly spent. Tarns retrieved Morgwyn's, scanned the field until he was satisfied every threat had ended, and then spurred Toriti north toward where Nephili Luch and Gandalf stood. He planned to check his pack later for materials to craft more lightning pots. The night was silent, but for the hissing of scorched earth and the far-off trees' golden glow. Chapter 12. International Firing Range, Ruins. Fronting the Gate. By the time Tarns reached Nephili Luch and Gandalf, their fight with the orcs was nearly over. The 2 surviving orcs tried to flee, but Nephili caught them. As they raised their iron swords in desperation, Nephili's war axe, charged with storm and thunder, came down. Unlike the orcs on Tarn's side, who had simply collapsed into sleep, this patch of ground was strewn with severed limbs. Most of the wounds on the wargs had been perforations in the jaw or abdomen, caused by cuckoo glintstone traps buried in the earth. Nephili severed the head of the last still unconscious orc. To make sure it wouldn't reanimate, sheathed her axe and stepped toward Tarns. "Are you hurt?" Tarns asked, glancing first at Gandalf. He was more worried about the seemingly older wizard than the fierce Nephili. He knew Nephili's strength well enough to be confident the orcs hadn't stood a chance against her. Before Gandalf could answer, Nephili interrupted. "You don't need to worry about him," she said. "Of the bodies on the ground now, excluding those taken out by Cuckoo Glintstone and lightning pots, he single-handedly felled half of them with his staff and sword." Tarns let out an inward sigh of relief. "Good. I'm glad you're both all right." Nephili looked at Gandalf then, her crimson eyes unreadable for a moment. After a pause, she added, almost apologetically, "The air stirred by your weapon told me you're certainly a capable warrior. I'd never seen a sorcerer use a staff to decapitate an enemy. I underestimated you." Gandalf laughed softly, betraying no weariness after the fight. "No apology needed, Nephili Luch. Compared to you, I'm hardly a match. I noticed you kept an eye on me during the fight, ready to step in if I was in danger." He turned to Tarns with a thoughtful look. "Those clay pots you gave me, their power exceeded my expectations. If the human kingdoms had such weapons when battling the orcs, it would reduce casualties and needless losses greatly." As a practical wizard, Gandalf was already imagining ways to deploy the lightning pot on the front lines. He felt it would be improper to bluntly ask for the recipe. Perhaps it was Tarns's secret. Tarns, perceptive, caught the implication. "The lightning pot isn't complicated to make," he said with a shrug. "It's simpler than you'd think." Gandalf's gaze brightened. "Are the key components the ritual cracked pot and the lightning flower? Mushrooms and crushed stone are common enough. Let me think. Are there plants in Middle-earth that can produce lightning, and anything that could stand in for an item bound by ritual?" Tarna's expression shifted to astonishment. "Mushrooms are common enough in the lands between, but crushed stone is rare. It's a jagged stone found only where ancient dragons have struck, fragments like scales broken from an ancient dragon's rocky hide. The crushed stone, faintly tainted with ancient dragon power, is the crucial ingredient that gives the lightning pot its strength." Gandalf's face went still. His cheeks twitched as he realized, eyes widening. "Wait, you used a precious dragon-scale material on these ordinary orcs?" Nephili's voice, calm and neutral, cut in. "Tarns is a pragmatist. If it kills the enemy quickly, he doesn't worry how precious the consumable is." Tarnas nodded. "If an item's gone, you can craft a new one. If a person's gone, they're gone. That you and Gandalf cleared these night-raiding orcs so quickly proves the lightning pot did its job." Gandalf sighed. "If only the kings of those human realms were as practical as you, my work in Middle-earth would be far easier." Tarns let the remark pass and picked up on Gandalf's earlier point about reducing casualties. If you only want a similar effect, you don't necessarily need a ritual-cracked pot. Simple gunpowder could do the trick. Put gunpowder and a large crossbow into a metal pot and use the explosion to launch the bolt. Gandalf shook his head. "Forgive me, Mr. Tarns, but I've never heard of gunpowder, at least not in this world. Do you know how to make it?" Tarns faltered. He knew how to use a flame pot, and like the lightning pot, a flame pot also needed a ritual-cracked pot, something he didn't know how to make. As for gunpowder, he only knew it by function, not by composition. Gandalf, for his part, hadn't connected the fireworks he'd set off in Hobbiton with gunpowder. The difference in scale made it feel unrelated. Seeing Tarns hesitate, Gandalf smiled. "You've given me an idea. I will seek substitutes along those lines." "Before that," Nephili said, looking east as Rogier approached, "it's getting late. We still need to gather the orc and warg bodies and clear the field, unless we want the stench of blood to attract predators or disease when we sleep." Tarns winced. "You're right. We should clean up." He thought longingly of the lands between, where killing didn't require burying. Gandalf limped forward on his staff and returned the ritual straight sword he'd been wielding. "This sword is well made and handy. Thank you for lending me your weapon, Mr. Tarns." Tarnas waved him off, then reached into his spatial pack and produced another ritual straight sword, pressing it into Gandalf's hand. "If you find it useful, keep it. Don't refuse. I have many of them and don't use them often. Consider it a gift." Gandalf accepted and strapped the sword to his gray robe. "You needn't worry about the warg corpses. Those beasts tend to disappear naturally after death. The orcs, however, must be dealt with. I'll help." Rogier came up, oddly serious. "That's what I wanted to say. The corpses, the orcs and wargs, they're being absorbed by the golden tree." "Absorbed?" Tarns looked up to meet Rogier's gaze. The two who had investigated the Deathblight phenomenon together understood at once. Gandalf frowned. "Absorbed by the golden tree? What do you mean?" Before Rogier could answer, Gandalf saw it for himself. Not far off, the bodies of the orcs and wargs lay where they had fallen, but golden light from the miraculous golden tree enveloped them. Through Gandalf's keen eyes, the corpses were not merely bathed in light, they were being assimilated. Flesh was breaking down into translucent golden particles that drifted toward the tree. Watching a moment longer, Gandalf realized those golden motes were the souls, evil souls being drawn in, but under the tree's light, their darkness seemed stripped away. The process wasn't instantaneous, but neither was it slow. The first orc and warg bodies had already fully transformed into golden particles and been drawn up into the canopy. Tarns doffed his white wolf warghost helmet, watched the particles go, and then strode to the golden tree. He reached out, touching its bark, hard but warm, and immersed his consciousness in it. The night sky was deep and star-rich. Streams of golden particles rose from the corpses, twisting together in the breeze into glittering currents like a broken river of starlight. The currents gathered and flowed toward the enormous golden tree, making its radiance grow. Gandalf kept the image in his mind, an indelible, golden memory. "I can't describe it properly," he murmured, beard twitching, staring at the now empty ground. "It's the most magical thing I've seen." The golden tree visibly grew a few centimeters, and then shed a wave of golden grace that spread outward, bathing the surrounding ruins in light across a radius of about 40 meters. When the light faded, the crumbling ruins had been transformed into something unfamiliar yet orderly. Around the tree, 4 or 5 new, roomy guard posts stood. The muddy, weed-choked ground had become a flagstone road fit for carts. 3 semi-open large tents dotted the roadside, each with a blazing campfire and a planted banner. The banners were deep yellow, embroidered with a lion and a great tree. Inside the tents were stacked firewood, sealed wooden barrels, and weapon racks. Though the racks were empty, those weapons were in their owners' hands. 12 soldiers in iron helmets and chainmail, their tabards bearing the golden lineage emblem, the vizier beast, and clad in cylindrical cuirasses, knelt before Tarns, heads bowed. They carried everything from one-handed swords and war picks to two-handed greatswords, and they were led by a tall, broad-shouldered knight. The ruined architecture around them seemed to have been picked up, sorted, and put back together in order by an unseen hand, forming a proper pass. For Gandalf the site was new, but for Rogier and Nephili the place was familiar. This was one of the passes leading to Stormvale Castle, long destroyed in the lands between, plainly called the Ruins of the Gatefront. "Are those Godric's royal troops?" Rogier asked. Nephili nodded. "By their emblems, yes. They don't look as terribly mummified as in the lands between, though." Gandalf muttered with a wry smile. "What other surprises do you have in store, Mr. Tarns? First a squad out of nowhere. Next you'll conjure a whole castle." Rogier snorted. "Or an ancient dragon." Gandalf closed his eyes. "My heart might not stand that." Tarna's thoughts strayed back to the Elden Ring. The absorption of orc and warg souls and corpses was the Elden Ring's doing, and he now understood that the golden tree could accelerate its growth by drawing in nearby deaths. He couldn't help but consider the practicality of it, lure the raiding beasts, kill them, and use their souls to cultivate the tree, though whether that was good or right was another matter. Chapter 13. The Blue Mountains. The starry sky faded, moonlight gave way, and the sun rose. When the first rays of morning touched Minheriath, Gandalf mounted his pony and said farewell to Tarns and the others who had come to see him off. "Are you sure you don't want to stay a few more days?" Tarns pressed, trying to persuade the wizard. "Your words are often like riddles, but I enjoy hearing your stories about Middle-earth." Gandalf accepted the staff Tarns handed him, weighing it in his hand before smiling. "Meetings are brief, and partings inevitable, my friend. Evil stirs on this land, and I must learn its source." Tarnas wasn't wearing his white wolf war ghost helmet. Sunlight caught his dark, messy hair, and his expression said plainly, "There he goes with his poetry again." He'd been impressed by Gandalf, especially after the battle last night, when the wizard had used glintstone magic to clear the roads outside the outpost, making the place look lived in instead of a wilderness. "I hope the next wizard I meet won't make 'I have things to do, farewell' sound like a complex poem," Tarns grinned. "Goodbye, Gandalf. If you pass the Shire, tell Bilbo I said the food is excellent." He patted his horse, and it moved off. Gandalf called back before he'd gone far. "Continue southwest from here. At the cape's end lies a large forest called Eriador. Some native Minheriath humans who hid there since the Second Age are said to dwell within. Or go southeast to a ruined port called Tikrundale. You might use it to reach Gondor." Tarns noted both names and shouted back, "Eriador, Tikrundale, got them!" With that, Gandalf urged his pony on. Rogier shaded his eyes with the brim of his hat and came over to Tarnas. "So are those your next destinations?" Tarnas answered. "I'll check the map Bilbo gave me first to see if they're marked. If they're too far, I'll stay and guard the golden tree. I won't lead people out until I can summon a proper fortress." He pulled the creased parchment map Bilbo had gifted from his pocket. The map showed wear from frequent use, but was still legible. Rogier peered at the markings, sword symbols, and tiny human figures scattered along the routes. What are these symbols? Rogier asked. The swords mark where I encountered orc attacks, Tarns explained, and the little figures are where I met a band of dwarves from the Blue Mountains. I've estimated distances. Our approximate location is here. He tapped a black dot labeled Golden Tree in the tongue of the lands between. Using Tarns's finger and Gandalf's directions, Rogier quickly found Eriador and Tuckrendale. Eriador's nearer, Tuckrendale farther, he said with a smile. Tarns nodded. I'll go to Eriador first to greet our neighbors. A voice came from behind them. Where are you going, my king? Nephili Lu stood there, dragging the carcass of a wild deer, an arrow through its skull and out the other side. Tarns glanced at the deer and asked, Did you just return from hunting? She dropped the carcass at her feet and nodded. Yes. The wild game around here either fled or was killed by the orcs last night. I went out before dawn and only found this one. She hesitated, then added, Tarns, we can't go visiting places yet. We have to deal with food. If it were just you, me, and this sorcerer, your dry rations would last a week, but 13 more mouths appeared overnight. This morning's breakfast used most of the supplies. Do we have enough for lunch? Tarns asked. Nephili kicked the deer. Counting this deer, we have just enough for lunch. Dinner's uncertain. I don't know how much I'll catch later. At least water's not a problem. There's a river outside the abandoned human town. Maybe we should put Godric's soldiers to work making fishing rods. That's one reason I planted the golden tree here, Tarns said. With a river nearby, we won't starve in the short term. The animals that fled will come to drink. But it's not a long-term fix. The number of mouths will only grow. I've got some seeds, but not crop seeds. He looked at the golden tree, its leaves still bathing in golden light. If we can get crop seeds, they'll ripen quickly under the tree's blessing. Nephili relaxed a little. You've got a plan, then? Tarns produced a slightly smaller battle axe from his spatial pack. The black head bore unknown runes. Nephili's eyes narrowed. As an axe wielder herself, she recognized fine craftsmanship, but this style wasn't from the lands between. This axe belonged to a race from another world. Thorin's work, Tarns thought. He'd been told Thorin wouldn't be stingy if asked for help, even seeds. It's Thorin's, Tarns said, turning the axe in his hands. He's a dwarf of the Blue Mountains. If I show this to other dwarves, someone will lead us to him. Rogier studied the map. The Blue Mountains aren't too far, but that means our trip to Eriador will have to wait. How long for a round trip? Nephili asked after glancing at the map. A week and a half, Tarns replied. I'll have Torrey ride at full speed to the Blue Mountains. If I don't find Thorin, I'll barter for what we need. Rogier shrugged. Torrete's only enough for you to ride. I'll stay and use glintstone magic to help Nephili hunt. That's best, Nephili agreed. Tarnis patted Rogier's shoulder. Next time, I'll let you see the wider world beyond the lands between. For now, I'm sorry. Nephili took up the deer again, said goodbye, and headed for the river to dress it. Tarns watched as the carcass did not dissolve into golden particles beneath the golden tree's glow as the orc and warg corpses had the night before. He nodded thoughtfully. Either Nephili shot it outside the tree's aura, or perhaps the tree only absorbed the souls of wicked creatures. He filed both possibilities away to test when he returned. Rogier bid Tarns farewell too. He needed to copy the map before his memory faded. Tarns blew his whistle, summoned Torrete, and rode to the pass he had opened the night before. A cheval de frise blocked the entrance. Beside it stood a Godric knight with a long spear and a golden-yellow great shield, flanked by 2 Godric soldiers with crossbows. Inside, teams patrolled in overlapping routes to eliminate blind spots. The golden tree stood guarded at the pass's center. The lead Godric knight bowed as Tarns approached. Tarns halted Torrete and said, I must go on important business. While I'm away, the safety of the golden tree and of Lady Nephili Lu and the Storm King will be entrusted to you. Until my return, obey her commands. Yes, Elden Lord, your majesty Tarns, the knight replied loudly. Until our lives leave us, no enemy shall set foot in the pass. 3 days later, Tarns and Torrete rode without rest. Through weary eyes, beneath his white wolf war-ghost helmet, Tarns at last saw a continuous range of blue peaks on the horizon. Up close, the Blue Mountains were a chain of deep blue summits blanketed in dark green pines, with smoke curling up from bustling towns along the slopes. Tarns removed his helmet, uncorked the red dew vial he called his Holy Grail bottle, and took a restorative sip. Energized, he guided Torrete onto a wide, dwarven road. Dwarves traveled the road in both directions, some returning with goods, others leaving with hope, carts loaded with merchandise. In town, vibrant life thrummed. The dwarves noticed Tarns. Some watched warily, others were curious. Many dwarves here had long beards, fiery red, golden, or black, braided in elaborate patterns. Compared to them, Thorin's short, stubbly beard was almost comical. For a moment, Tarns wondered if Thorin had been a taller hobbit rather than a dwarf. Humans weren't unknown in the Blue Mountains, but they normally appeared as finely dressed merchants. A human in armor, riding a horse, and without obvious goods to trade was rare. Soldiers at the gate, fully armored and speared, approached to question him. The lead captain had a long, fiery red beard and spoke halting common. "Your name, human? And why come to the Blue Mountains?" Tarns kept his hands visible and answered plainly. "Call me Tarnus. I'm looking for a dwarf named Thorin. Do you know him?" Hearing the name Thorin, the dwarves' caution hardened. Whatever passed over their faces, Tarnas couldn't tell, but their wariness increased rather than eased. Tarns straightened and held his ground, careful not to provoke the guards. Chapter 14. Longing crosses the sea, surging toward a homeland that no longer exists. It wasn't only the gate guards who were on edge. Every dwarf waiting to enter the city, both in front of and behind Tarns, tensed when they heard him speak the name Thorin. At the sound, they instinctively stepped away from him, making bright, tall Tarns stand out even more among them. The small commotion drew more attention, and the guards posted at the gate soon took notice. A broad-shouldered dwarf, bald with tattoos circling his head, and a few centimeters taller than the rest, strode toward them, carrying a battle axe. Once he caught sight of Tarns's clothes, he broke into a run. Tarns, however, was still talking to the gathered dwarves. "Does the name Thorin mean something to you?" he asked. Their faces at the sound of the name were reverent rather than afraid or angry, which told Tarns that the Thorin he had rescued meant something to these people. The red-bearded captain did not answer directly. Instead, he fixed his gaze on Tarns's helmet and asked more seriously, "What do you want with Thorin?" Tarnas kept his voice easy. "He told me I could come to him if I needed a favor." He cast a quick look at the guards, who still held their weapons tightly. It gave him a headache. In the lands between, when someone blocked your way, you usually cut through them. Most of the people he'd met there had been fanatics, impossible to reason with. These dwarves were different, capable of conversation, and Tarns, used to solving problems with a blade, wasn't sure how to act. If Rogier were here, he thought, the situation would feel easier. Rogier was good at these things. "I know he gave me an axe," Tarns added. "He said with that battle axe I'd be able to find him in the Blue Mountains. If you like, I can show it to you. I can tell you Thorin's important to you. Please believe me, I only came for a small favor." The captain stood motionless for a few seconds, then nodded so slightly it was nearly hidden by his helmet and beard. "Dismount first, human wizard," he said. "You're too tall up there. It's hard for me to look up at you." "No problem." Tarns stroked Toretti's flank and tapped the small whistle on his finger. The steed dissolved into motes of light and folded into the golden ring. Tarns landed smoothly on the cobbles. Around him, the dwarves murmured excitedly. "Did you see that? The horse, gone." They looked at him as if that made everything clearer. "You're a wizard, then?" Tarnas nodded, reached into his spatial pack, and produced the battle axe Thorin had given him. The axe seemed to appear from nowhere, and the dwarves' whispers turned to astonished chatter. Tarns turned the weapon so the captain could read the inscription and half-crouched to present it. The captain only needed a glance to recognize it. He did not take the axe, but gently pushed it back toward Tarns. "This is his battle axe. I believe you mean no harm, human wizard." At that moment, the tattooed dwarf closed the last few yards and shouted in a deep voice, "Gloin, this is Mr. Tarns, the one who saved me." The red-bearded captain, Gloin, looked at Tarns with sudden understanding. "Why didn't you say earlier you saved Thorin?" he asked. Sounded a little awkward. "I didn't want to boast," Tarnas replied. "And judging by how you were watching me, I doubt I would have earned your trust even if I had said it. No need to make a fuss, Mr. Gloin. Gloin grumbled, half amused. You saved Thorin. Then you're a friend to all of us. I owe you a barrel of ale, Mr. Tarns. The tattooed dwarf came up gasping from the run, bowed, and said respectfully, Dwalin, at your service, Mr. Tarns. We left in a hurry before, and I didn't get to introduce myself. Tarns remembered him, the dwarf who had fought beside Thorin during the orc attack and come out unscathed. Good to see you, Dwalin, Tarns said. I'd like to catch up, but I really need Thorin's help. Dwalin didn't ask what help. He simply led Tarns into the town. Behind them, Gloin called cheerfully, Remember that barrel of ale. I'll make good on it. Tarns waved. Dwalin chuckled. When the time comes, Gloin and I will drink with you. Walking through the streets, Tarns felt lighter. The town was carved against the mountain. Sunlight slanted through narrow fissures, lighting stout houses hewn from rock and packed earth. The streets were flagstones smoothed by generations of footsteps. Small domed homes sat close together, their roofs layered with sod and moss where tiny flowers bloomed. Smoke braided up from chimneys and vanished into arched doorways that led into the mountain. Metal shop signs swung above doorways, hammered with fine totems that drew the eye. The market was a bustle of home-brewed ale, hand-forged weapons, and delicate jewelry. Merchants shouted, customers haggled, and blacksmiths' hammers rang in a steady rhythm. Children darted about, their laughter filling the narrow lanes with life. Tarns expected Thorin to live in some stately hall, but found him in a modest blacksmith's shop. He wore coarse off-white linen, his forearms strong and dusted with soot as he hammered a glowing block of metal. If not for his short, distinctive beard and a more handsome, almost clean-shaven face than most dwarves displayed, Tarns might have assumed he was an ordinary smith. Dwalin, what's this? Thorin asked, not yet turning. Then he looked up and recognized the familiar armor. Ah, Tarns, I'm glad you're safe. Dwalin laughed, took the hammer from Thorin, and swapped places. Thorin grabbed a rag and wiped his hands before meeting Tarns' eyes. What trouble brings you to us? Is that shield of yours broken? Your straight sword snapped? No, Tarns said. None of that. I need grain, a large quantity, and seeds if possible. Dwalin laughed at that. You came to the dwarves for grain? For crops? If you're hungry, the Blue Mountains welcome you, food and drink aplenty. Thorin's expression grew serious. He gave Dwalin a subtle kick that silenced the other dwarf's loud mirth, then locked eyes with Tarns. In a clear, weighty voice he asked, How much do you need? What seeds? I can gather the supplies, but why do you want them? Tell me. Tarns replied plainly, I want to rebuild my homeland. When we first met, I ignored your warnings and pushed on toward Minhiriath because someone told me I could re-establish my home there after it was burned and flooded and struck by pestilence. I've started by finding a few of my people, but the land is desolate. I need grain and seeds to survive the first hard season. I don't expect them for free. If you have use for things from my homeland, I can trade. I can offer Warmstone, which slowly heals wounds and restores stamina. He paused and waited. At the phrase, rebuild my homeland, Thorin's clear eyes clouded, transported somewhere far to the east of the Misty Mountains, beyond Mirkwood, past Lonely Peaks, to the great Lonely Mountain in the north. Dwalin had also stopped working and murmured Thorin's name softly, bringing him back. Thorin exhaled, emotions shifting across his face. 50 dwarf rations, meat and dried fruit included, he said. For seeds, I'll send wheat, corn, tomatoes, cucumbers, and the like. I'll also give, on my own behalf, 2 dairy cows, 7 sheep, and a dozen chickens. Will that be enough? Enough to rebuild your home? Tarns did a quick mental tally, wondering what would be fair payment for so much, and missed the slight emphasis Thorin put on rebuild your home. He answered eagerly, It's more than enough. What do you want in return? Forging stones? I have some left, stones from my land that make forging and sharpening easier. Thorin's voice came low. Take the stones. They're free. Tarns blinked, then shook his head. No, that's too much. You've already gone far beyond what I expected. I should at least pay. Dwalin came close and patted Thorin's shoulder. You don't need to pay, Mr. Tarns. Saving our 3 was worth more than this. And you wish to rebuild your homeland. How could we deny a friend that? Thorin drew a breath, a faint smile struggling to the corner of his mouth. Only those who have lost their home know how precious a chance to build it again can be. If I were you, Tarns, I'd ask for even more. Supplies. Men. I understand the longing. Tarnis caught the hidden weight in Thorin's words, then glanced at Dwalin, who also looked subdued. He met Thorin's steady gaze and asked plainly, "Are the Blue Mountains not your homeland?" Silence settled for a moment in the forge as Thorin's face tightened with memories. Chapter 15. Feely, Killy, at your service. Outside the smithy, a group of dwarf children ran past, their bright laughter cutting through the quiet inside. Thorin and Dwalin smiled as the kids peered curiously at Tarns. Tarnas waved back gently, the children giggled and scampered off. Thorin released his calm gaze from the children and looked at Tarns. "The Blue Mountains are home to these children," he said, "but not to those of Dwalin's and my age. Our homeland lies far to the east and north, beyond the Misty Mountains, through Mirkwood, north of Lake Town, Erebor, the Lonely Mountain. When I was 24, a great dragon from the north struck our halls and scattered our people. It has been over 100 years since." Tarns blinked, then hesitated. "Wait, how old are you and Dwalin now?" Dwalin, a little taken aback, answered plainly, "I'm 167 this year. Thorin is 193. "So dwarves live that long," Tarns murmured. "I thought you looked like you were in your 20s. He turned to Thorin. "Gandalf and I spoke about the Lonely Mountain and the dragon, but I didn't realize you meant Erebor." Thorin's expression tightened. "Gandalf?" he repeated. "The human wizard in gray? Why would he speak of the Lonely Mountain?" Tarns remembered Gandalf's words and relayed them. Gandalf said he feared the dragon might be in league with some dark power. He planned to go north to find out. Hearing that, Thorin grew more solemn, brows drawn. He gave Tarns a simple nod of thanks. "I have wanted to meet that gray-robed wizard," he said. "If I see him, I will speak of Erebor. It feels fated." Thorin called Dwalin over and asked him to ready the supplies and seed stock Tarns would need. Dwalin moved with efficient purpose. Once he was gone, Thorin told Tarns, "You will not be able to take these supplies alone, not livestock especially. I'll send a few dwarves skilled in husbandry and farming to go with you. They will teach your people how to tend animals and plant crops." Tarns's relief was plain. "I would be grateful," he said. He had not considered how different the plants and animals of Middle-earth might be, nor had he expected that companions with practical know-how would be needed. Nephili Lux had been born in the wildlands north of the lands between, and likely knew hunting rather than farming. Rogier was a wizard. Knight Godric and his dozen soldiers were not farmers. Thorin's offer was indispensable. Tarnis hesitated, then added, "I must give you something in return. You cannot refuse. You told me you long to reclaim the Lonely Mountain. Its dragon is the greatest threat to you. Perhaps these will help." He saw Thorin open his mouth to refuse, and quickly produced two items, a shield-shaped amulet stamped with a red dragon motif, and a single-handed axe whose head was sheathed in scales, radiating cold. The amulet was a fire dragon crest talisman, 3 fire dragons entwined, designed to reduce fire damage. The axe was the frozen shell axe, made from the scales of a flying dragon called Freezing Mist. Tarns had found it in Liurnia, had Hugh reforged and strengthened it with somber smithing stones, and had learned it could unleash a battle skill, a forceful stomp that threw out a wave of intense cold. "Because Gandalf said the dragon in your mountain breathes terrible fire," Tarns explained as he handed them over. "I thought these might be useful." Thorin accepted them solemnly. He examined the axe first. The handle was cold to the touch and did not warm in his hands. Curious, he set the axe head against a hot, glowing iron bar on the forge bench, the same bar Dwalin had been shaping into a sword. The moment the dragon scale point touched the red-hot steel, a hissing mist burst out. Thorin expected steam, but the spray bit his face with cold. The smithy chilled, the hot bar split clean in two with a sharp snap, its broken faces crusted in frost. The bench itself had frosting spreading across it. "With just this axe, you could buy 100 head of cattle in the Blue Mountains," Thorin said, dumbfounded. "In a human kingdom, offering a battle skill like this would win you a title, and you've given it as if it were nothing." Tarns smiled. "You flatter me. The axe has a battle skill. Do you want to try it in an open space?" He had a few of the same axes in his pack from past lives. Thorin neither let go nor resisted. "Of course," he said, grinning openly for once. "Dwalin will be done soon. Come." He stowed the talisman, tightened the axe at his side, and led Tarns to the yard behind the smithy. The yard was cluttered, slag heaps, discarded oars, abandoned bellows and furnaces, but open. "You don't live here?" Tarnas asked, glancing about. "Your people respect you. I expected finer accommodations." Thorin waved a hand. "This is only my forge. My home is nearby. Dwarves don't mind grime. Even kings soil their clothes at the anvil." Tarnas asked, "Do you want me to teach you how to use the battle skill?" Thorin shook his head, smiling. "I appreciate it, but the moment I took it, I knew how to use it." Satisfied, Tarn stepped back and watched. Thorin planted his feet, set his grip on the frozen shell axe, and stomped down with force. Cold poured from the earth like a tide. Frost mist shot outward and cloaked half the yard. The ground nearest his foot froze in a spreading ring. The mist glittered like a haze of tiny blades in the spring sun. 10 paces out, the frost thinned. Dull cracking sounds popped through the air as the cold worked the soil, then slowly a breeze scattered the mist while the frost stayed stubbornly on the ground. Thorin's face lit with joy. He fastened the axe to his belt, returned to Tarns, and embraced him around the waist, dwarf-sized though he was. "You've given me a wondrous weapon," he said. "With this axe, I'm more certain than ever I'll take back Erebor. When that day comes, I will share the gold of the mountain with you." Tarnas asked, practical as ever, "When you used the battle skill, did it feel different? Did it cost you more than normal? The axe is powerful, but its main strength is the blade itself." Thorin had already noted it. It took more stamina than the same movements usually do, but nothing else, no burning or twisting of the limbs. Tarnas was surprised. He had seen Gandalf channel magical power to use a weapon's battle skill, but Thorin appeared to use only stamina. He shrugged the mystery off. If the world had one creator like the Iluvatar he had glimpsed in dreams, explanations would come later. Dwalin returned at that moment. He studied the frozen ground and reported, "The supplies Mr. Tarn's needs are ready. The dwarves chosen to instruct animal husbandry and farming are assigned." "And the guards?" Thorin asked. Dwalin, his gruff face softening into a rare smile, said, "That is the problem. Every soldier who heard they could guard the human wizard rushed to volunteer." Thorin toyed with the axe's cold head. He leaned close and murmured 2 names into Dwalin's ear. Dwalin's brow lifted in surprise. "Are you sure of them both?" he whispered. "What if they face real danger?" Thorin hesitated a beat, then answered firmly, "They are fine warriors, but they haven't seen the world. Traveling with a human wizard will do them good." Dwalin nodded reluctantly, then stepped forward and addressed Tarns with a brief apology before hustling off to make the final preparations. By the time Dwalin returned, the sun was high. Thorin insisted Tarns stay for a hearty dwarf lunch. Smoked meats, meat patties, ham, bacon, venison sausage, vegetables were scarce. More than the food, Tarns remembered the endless tankards of ale raised in his honor. Thorin limited the toasts to 10 tankards, out of consideration for Tarnas' schedule. Tarns left smelling faintly of ale and meat, but with dignity preserved by a helmet. After a sincere farewell, Thorin and Tarns wished each other success in rebuilding their homes. Dwalin led Tarns to a dwarf caravan that would accompany him. 2 dwarves in particular greeted Dwalin with boisterous laughter and a warm embrace. Both were young, their beards short, their features handsome and lively. Their garb was finer than Dwalin's, but practical, and each carried weapons. The gold-haired one had a short sword and many hidden pockets. The dark-haired youth bore a bow, a quiver, and also a short sword. Tarns nodded politely as they approached. The 2 stiffened for a moment, then, after a reassuring pat from Dwalin, relaxed and bowed in unison. "Feely," the yellow-haired one announced. "Keely," the other said. "At your service," they finished together. Thorin had sent his nephews as part of the escort. He considered the journey with a human wizard not too dangerous and a good opportunity for the brothers to gain experience while forging a friendly bond with Tarns. Feely was being groomed by Thorin as a potential successor. Keely was a lighter spirit, more carefree. Thorin also hoped the brothers might one day wield weapons like the frozen shell axe. With the dwarven instructors, the guards Feely and Keely, and the caravan loaded with supplies and livestock, Tarns prepared to set out, comforted by the knowledge that he would not be going into the unknown alone. Chapter 16. The Lively Dwarf Brothers. Tarn started back at the sudden formal bow from the dwarf brothers. When they shouted, "At your service," in voices that could have woken the mountains, he hurried to put them at ease. "There's no need for all that. If anything, I should be thanking you for escorting these supplies." Keely, the younger of the two with black hair, brightened but kept his bow. He leaned close to his older brother, Feely, and whispered, "Dwalin was right. This sorcerer does seem much friendlier than we thought." Feely whispered back, "Indeed." With a silent agreement, the brothers rose. Keely, grinning foolishly, reached out to shake Tarns's hand, but Feely stopped him. Feely straightened, his expression earnest. "You are the one who saved Thorin, Mr. Tarnas. This is the least we can do for you." Keely glanced at Feely, then nodded and added, grinning, "Yes, we heard your story. We're accompanying the caravan to repay you for saving Thorin." Dwalin came up at that moment, patting both on the shoulder. "I told you Mr. Tarns is easy to get on with, but save the chatter until we're on the road. His homeland needs these supplies, and we must leave soon." He grinned at Tarnas. "After we clear the city, lead the way for us, will you?" "Of course," Tarnas replied. "I remember the route and left markers on the way in. I didn't meet any orcs on that path. Should be safe." Dwalin nodded and shouted to the other dwarves to make ready. Tarns took in the convoy, 3 full wagons piled with grain and seed, each driven by a dwarf coachman, 2 dairy cows, 7 sheep, and a dozen white-feathered chickens in their own livestock wagons. If everything traveled by carriage, they'd move faster than he'd expected. It also meant he might need to tweak his route. Toridi, his spirit steed, could go over mountains and through valleys, but those carriages could not. At first, Tarns wondered if 4 escorts, himself, Dwalin, Feely, and Killy, were enough for such a large convoy. His worry eased when he saw the wagon drivers with short swords and hand axes at their belts. They were no Dwalin, but they weren't defenseless. The sight of 7 carriages leaving at once drew the attention of many townsfolk. Curiosity spiked when they saw Feely and Keely escorting a human. Still, life in the town went on, and the tale would settle into tavern talk by evening. They reached the gate and found Thorin waiting to see them off. Beside him stood Gloin, the dwarf guard captain. Tarns remembered their small misunderstanding when he first arrived. Tarnas began to dismount, but Thorin waved him off. "Just seeing you off. No need for formalities, and 7 wagons here would block the road." Tarnas smiled and leaned down to clasp Thorin's hand one more time. "Once my homeland is settled, I'll invite you to the Golden Tree to meet my people. It was you, Thorin Oakenshield, who helped us in our darkest hour." Thorin nodded and patted Toridi's saddle, watching them go. As Tarnas passed, he noticed Gloin looking a touch gloomier than usual, as if there was something unsaid. Tarnas stepped back a little and called, lightheartedly, "Gloin, you still owe me a barrel of ale. Have it ready next time I visit." Gloin's face brightened instantly. The red-bearded captain laughed and thumped his chest. Then, Tarnas tossed a small, smooth white stone that glowed faintly with golden light toward him. Gloin caught it accurately, surprised. Tarns turned his horse, waved, and called back, "This warm stone is for you. Consider it proof our misunderstanding is settled, and a token of friendship." Thorin recognized the stone from earlier, the same one Tarns had used to heal an injured kinsman, and clapped Gloin on the shoulder. "It's useful in a pinch," he said. Gloin's beard twitched, and he thumped his chest again in thanks as the wagons rolled out. Feely and Killy had been talking lightly in one of the wagons until they saw Thorin. At once, Feely straightened and gave a warning cough to his younger brother. Killy snapped to attention. Thorin's expression hardened like a stern uncle. "Feely, on this journey you represent the Durin line. Don't lose face before the sorcerer. Show Tarns the courage of our house. Bring him back safe." He turned to Killy. "You've been curious about the world beyond, Killy, but don't cause trouble for your brother and Mr. Tarns. If you can't handle something, ask Feely or Dwalin. Don't try to be a hero alone." Both brothers nodded vigorously. "Goodbye, Uncle Thorin," they said together. Thorin watched the convoy until it vanished from sight. 3 days later, as the sun neared its zenith, the pace had been brisk, faster than Tarns expected, but the dwarves were still flesh and blood and needed rest at night. Tarns checked his map and the markers he had left. He estimated about 4 more days to reach the Golden Tree. He resisted impatience. The dwarves were already making good time. No orc attacks troubled them. Feely and Killy chatted about how rare orcs were in the west. Orcs mostly don't venture here, Feely explained. Out east, elves and men patrol and drive them back. The Misty Mountains are where the worst of them come from. Killy gestured excitedly. Human merchants said they saw tall creatures near the Misty Mountains. They were frightened off by a terrible roar. Feely laughed. Not orcs. Those are trolls. They're huge and turn to stone in sunlight, so they hide in the high places. Merchants who meet them in the open day are either very lucky or they wouldn't be talking about it at all. Tarns listened with interest. They really turn to stone in sunlight? I thought they were constructs made with glintstone, something that just couldn't take light, Keely chimed in. And there are even smaller ones in the Misties. Shorter than us, goblins, they call them. Feely shrugged. Maybe, if you see one, just chop off its head with your axe. Their laughter faded when the rush of a river reached their ears. We've come to the Brandywine, Tarn said, looking up. The river glittered in the clear spring sun, flowing as relentlessly as when he'd first seen it. He rode forward to Dwalin. Let's make a stop here. Everyone's worked hard this morning. We'll make a fire, eat, then cross the Brandywine. After that, we're at most halfway to the Golden Tree. Dwalin's brow creased. We still need a ford, somewhere shallow enough for the wagons. That could take time. Tarns laughed softly. Dwalin, you call me a wizard sometimes. Have you forgotten that I am one? Dwalin's face lit up. He hurried to the drivers and told them, half in their tongue, half in common, for everyone to tie up and rest. Feely and Killy volunteered to scout the banks. If orcs show up, I'll loosen a few arrows for them, Killy declared. They returned at noon with no sign of danger. Keely even brought back a couple of prairie rabbits he'd shot, which would add to the meal. After lunch, Tarns took his staff and, using the ice glintstone magic Lonnie had shown him in the lands between, drew a solid bridge of ice across the river. The dwarves cheered and crowded onto the translucent span to test it. The surface held firm. Tarns had bound it strong. Keely stared at the vanished staff and the still gleaming ice. Magic! Wow! Can I learn that? He asked, eyes wide. Feely patted him. Ask him, Killy. Mr. Tarns is gentle. He won't be angry. The younger dwarf rode up to Tarns, heart on his sleeve. Tarns looked down, surprised by the boy's courage. He thought for a moment, the silence stretching and making Keely nervous. Finally, Tarny shook his head gently. I'm not good at teaching. Killy's face fell, until Tarns smiled and continued. But if you don't mind, once we reach my homeland, I'll introduce you to a glintstone magic teacher. He's the one who taught me, an excellent master. Keely brightened at once. Feely nudged his brother with a grin and added, half joking, don't forget me if he agrees to teach you. Tarnas glanced at Feely and nodded. The brothers beamed, and the convoy continued across the ice bridge, the wagons passing safely into the next leg of their journey. Chapter 17. A large-scale orc attack? Perhaps because he had the dwarves for company, Tarns didn't find the monotonous landscape tedious. Dwalin and the others stayed cheerful and spirited. Whenever they stopped to rest, they'd stitch together simple, catchy folk songs about whatever had happened that day, using spoons and plates as improvised percussion. Feely and Killy, the two young brothers, behaved like boys on their first journey far from the Blue Mountains. They chattered endlessly with Tarns about dwarves and their homeland, and Tarns, in turn, told them stories of the lands between, of friends and foes, of triumphs and losses. Dwalin listened quietly whenever the three spoke. Before long, it became routine that whenever they ate or drank, the dwarves would cheerfully hand Tarns a cup of ale and wait for another tale. Even the cook, mending the fire and stirring pots, would strain an ear to hear. Feely and Keely were particularly keen on the heroic stories. Feely, the elder and Thorin's chosen heir, favored Morgoth, the Omen King guarding his lonely city. Keely, carefree and passionate, preferred tales like Iron Fist Alexander's, of a warrior jar who rose again and again to meet greater foes. It fit their temperaments. Feely more guarded and self-aware, Keely open and expressive to a fault. Dwalin had filled Tarns in on the boy's status. Feely, being raised as an heir, watched closely by Thorin, Keely allowed to be more of a light-hearted spirit. Tarns noticed it in their faces and in how they listened, Feely reserved, Keely immediate in laughter or tears. Tarns liked the two, and when they showed reverence or wonder, he would trade a grin for it. 10 days after he left home, the convoy approached the ruins where the golden tree stood. "Everyone, we're almost there!" Tarns called, and then dismounted. He patted Toretti and recalled it with the spirit steed whistle. Dwalin bellowed a few words in Dwarvish. The wagons slowed. Killy rode up first and looked across the ruined city. Weathered stone, roofs collapsed, vegetation reclaiming paths. He blinked and blurted, "Mr. Tarns, is your homeland just these stones?" Dwalin coughed. Feely, a step behind, smacked Killy on the back of the head. The younger brother reddened and stammered an apology. "No offense meant," Tarnas said gently. "These ruins are remnants left by the local folk. They aren't my homeland." The dwarves relaxed. Dwalin signaled the drivers forward. The wooden wheels churned through grass a fist high, leaving deep ruts. They needn't have followed Tarns long. From a distance, the golden tree and its gilded canopy announced themselves. Tall, impossible, its leaves like a fall no season should have called. "Is that all gold?" Killy cried, dwarf curiosity pulling him forward. Filey squinted and shook his head. "Not gold. Leaves turned golden." Tarn smiled. He'd been gone 10 days. The tree had grown 3 or 4 meters since he left. It seemed to brighten as he approached, its boughs swaying though no wind moved them. Godric's soldiers on outpost watchtowers saw the movement and, spotting the convoy and Tarns in his white wolf war ghost armor at the front, straightened. One soldier hurried down to report while another kept watch. Nefili Lu, finishing her push-ups nearby, heard the news and straightened up, sweat beading along her skin. She took up her battle axe and went to greet him. As the dwarves drew near, they fell silent, staring up at a trunk that shimmered in the sun and a canopy that rustled like a golden ocean. Dwalin stepped onto the gilt grass and murmured his awe. Keely squatted to touch the blades. They were soft and warm to the hand. He plucked a strand and held it up, the stem glowing quietly in sunlight. Feely, unable to resist, took a low leaf and examined it. One by one, the dwarves collected small tokens, golden grass stems, a leaf or two, smiles creasing their bearded faces. Tarns could have told them that 10 days ago these had been ordinary green things, but he let them have their wonder. He could give them proper gifts later. Tarns surveyed the settlement. Stone houses that had been choked with ivy looked cleared. Nefili and the soldiers had been busy in his absence. A carriage path had been cleared as well. Nefili walked up and, arms open, welcomed him with a warm hug. "The breeze tells me the Lord has returned," she said, then stepped back and nodded at the dwarves. Godric's knights, upon seeing Tarns, saluted and stood with shields and spears, rigid as statues. Nefili admitted she'd never seen dwarves before. At first, she mistook them for some short, wicked soldiers of the lands between, but realized quickly they were not the same. "These are dwarves," Tarns whispered. "They brought our supplies." Nefili smiled and introduced herself. "Thank you for your help. My name is Nefili Lu. I serve Lord Tarns. Call me Nefili." Feely looked up sharply. "Wait, Mr. Tarns, she called you Lord. Are you a king? I didn't show you proper respect on the road." He remembered Thorin's warnings and felt suddenly awkward. Dwalin's expression was the same, guarded, then easing, as he watched Tarns shrug off the concern. Tarnas removed his helmet and breathed deeply. "Filey, you've been happy company the whole way. Thorin is your king, yes, but you didn't need to bow to me on an open road. You came to help of your own will. That's thanks enough." Keely grinned and nodded, unconcerned. The tense looks among the dwarves dissolved into their old camaraderie. Tarns called to a motionless Godric knight. "Find 3 soldiers to help the dwarves unload grain and livestock. Among them should be men skilled with animals and crops. Give these dwarves room to work." The knight tapped spear to ground and hurried off. Tarnas led Philly, Killy, and Dwalin nearer the golden tree. Nefeli fell into step beside him to brief him on what had happened while he was away. "There have been 2 more night raids by orcs these past days," she said. "Smaller than the first. Their bodies, the golden tree absorbed them." Tarn's face tightened. 2 more? Casualties? Any survivors left so we could question them why they attacked?" "We left one alive each time," Nefeli said with a frown. "They didn't get into the outpost the Godric soldiers held. They said they saw the golden tree's light at night and thought there were humans, so they attacked. It sounded absurd to me." Tarns remembered Gandalf's cold assessment. Orcs exist to destroy and spread slaughter. He didn't lower his voice. It wasn't a secret. Feely stepped forward. May I say something about orcs? Of course, Tarns answered. I don't know them well. Any insight from a dwarf is welcome. Feely's tone grew sober. If your home's been hit 3 times, if the first 2 were chance, the third was not. Orcs aren't all mindless. If several of their bands go missing in one area, their commanders will notice. They learn tactics. My uncle Thorin says some orcs are very cunning. I worry the 3rd raid wasn't just a raid, it was reconnaissance. They may have scouted and marked this place. Dwalin agreed with a low voice. Killy nodded along, still a little bewildered. Nefeli's expression shifted as she described what she'd seen in the 3rd attack. During the 3rd raid, about 9 orcs kept trying to break in, ignoring our men. We captured 1 survivor. He was among them. It felt like some of them were desperate to get inside, while others simply watched. Feely and Dwalin exchanged a hard look. Feely said, then during that night, some orcs must have hidden and observed. If so, the next attack could be a general assault, coordinated, with almost every orc and warg in Minhiriath joining. There could be hundreds. The group fell silent at the warning. Tarn's jaw set. The golden tree shimmered overhead, beautiful and unnervingly alive, but the rising danger left no room for illusion. Chapter 18, Nobles and Teachers. Thanks for 1,000 favorites. 100 orcs and a pack of wargs. Individually, they weren't formidable, but in numbers, they were a nuisance. Tarns thought of orcs like cockroaches. Stamping one out was simple, but a few days later, they'd be back in the same place. Kill one wave, and another would crawl up from somewhere. He gave Philly, Killy, and Dwalin an apologetic look. If Filey's right, our many carriages moving through the ruins must have alerted the hidden orcs. I'm sorry for putting you all in danger. He forced his voice to sound steady. But don't worry, no dwarf who fights with the golden tree will be harmed while I still stand. To his surprise, the 3 dwarves exchanged glances and laughed. Dwalin, roaring with amusement, said, What are you talking about, Mr. Tarns? We dwarves don't hide behind others to watch them fight. Thorin sent us as your escorts. We'll do our duty until we return. Feely and Killy both nodded. Feely crossed his arms and said with fierce confidence, My kin's blood is on those orcs' hands. I'll personally show those cowards what an axe can do and avenge my family. Killy added proudly, And my bow. Dwalin's laughter faded into a sober tone. We should warn the kin who came with the carriages about a possible orc attack. They aren't soldiers, but they can fight when it comes to orcs. That's true, Tarn said. Nefeli, take Feely and the others to the carriages. Oh, where's Rogier? What is he doing? Nefeli said it's his turn at the outpost. Nefeli Lu answered. You'll find him inside. After a few more instructions, Tarns left for the outpost. From the watchtower came Rogier's cheerful voice. I saw the carriages. You've had a long journey, Tarnies. We'll talk about the road another time. Lots to tell about the dwarves, but not now. The orcs could attack at any time. Rogier, put the outpost on high alert. Rotate guards on the towers. Tarns' words came quick and tight. Rogier's relaxed expression snapped serious. I'll watch the horizon. I'll leave it to you. By the way, I found an apprentice for you. He'll meet you soon. Tarns hurried toward the golden tree, leaving Rogier blinking in surprise. Rogier opened his mouth to ask, but Tarna's rush made him hold back. Tarnas had said he'd explain later. Nefeli had told him 2 more waves of night-raiding orcs had been defeated while he was away, and the golden tree had absorbed their souls. Tarnas hoped the tree could summon again. 10 days apart, it had grown a lot. The golden tree bathed in soft gold. Tarn stroked its trunk, bigger by 2 sizes since he'd left, and felt it pulse like a pleased child when praised. The Elden Ring's multi-ringed golden emblem rose on the bark as he touched it. His mind slid into the familiar visions of the lands between. The Golden Grace Reserve had swelled. The tree's growth and the absorbed orc souls had stored more power for summoning. That steadied him. Feely had warned this night attack was likely a major orc offensive in Minhiriath. The enemy would outnumber them, more than 100, but that didn't make Tarns panic. Morgwyn's sacred spear and Nefeli's storm magic could clear mobs. Nefeli and Rogier were both formidable. The problem was numbers, including Philly, Killy, and Dwalin. They were under 30. That left them on the defensive, unable to pursue. Only Tarns, Philly, Killy, and Dwalin could fight mounted, but the dwarves rode small riding horses, not war mounts. Tarns pictured the warg's bulk beside those ponies and dismissed cavalry as an option. The small horses weren't trained for war or for the ruined, forested terrain they'd be fighting in. The warg's roars and scent might terrify them. Dwarves used stout mountain goats as war mounts. Those wouldn't be available to Tarns and his group. The orcs would scatter. It would be difficult to chase them all down. Tarns understood now why Fili hated orcs so much. There was no permanent eradication, only constant irritation. Tarns resolved that when he had the forces, he would make orcs vanish from all Minhiriath. For tonight, he could only aim to annihilate the main force. If Nephili's Stormhawks were here, pursuit would be easy. Tarns let his mind flick through the lands between summons. The Stormhawk demanded Stormvale Castle, too costly. Agil the Flying Dragon required Agil Lake and the southern village. He had enough grace to summon the village, but not the lake. The more he scanned, the more frustrated he felt at the huge grace costs. But he reminded himself, rebuilding the lands between here would be slow. Impatience would only lead him astray. Then a name lit up in his peripheral vision. He focused. The image of a fortress stepped into view. Hate Fort. A stout military stronghold backed by the sea, easily defended but hard to assault. Rocks pounded by roaring waves, gulls crying above. On its walls, soldiers in kingrick armor fought nimble demi-humans. A collapsed demi-human queen lay sprawled in the central courtyard, 3 meters long, her blood soaking the soil and staining nearby roses a strange red. On the ramparts, a knight in kingrick armor sheathed a greatsword, his red cloak fluttering like a blood flower. If he summoned Hate Fort, Tarns thought, he'd gain not only the fortress's military strength, but also protection from orc night raids. Orcs couldn't breach those walls without siege gear. Even if they tried to bring siege engines, it would slow them long enough for Tarns to strike. More importantly, summoning Hate Fort would bring Kenneth Hate with it, a loyal noble of the Golden Tree stationed there. Tarns remembered Kenneth, a good-natured older man with short golden hair and beard, old-fashioned royal bearing and honest manners. When Tarns once recovered Hate Fort in the lands between, Kenneth awarded him a brass short blade. At the time, Tarns had thought it a paltry gift after his work retaking the fort, until Melina told him it was a symbolic token of favor from the Golden Tree's nobility, an emblem that marked Tarns as an honored guest close to the royal family. Tarns had later given that dagger to Bilbo because the hobbit's optimism and hospitality had touched him. Kenneth Hate, Tarns decided, was essential to summon, not because of sheer martial might. He wasn't Nephili or Rogier, but because he was a statesman. In the lands between, after the Elden Ring was shattered, you could draw steel and cut your way through most problems. In Middle-earth, politics mattered. Kenneth could win hearts where swords could not. The Golden Tree seemed to sense Tarns' intent. It swayed as if in quiet conversation, and golden rays flowed from its trunk like a rising tide, weaving a brilliant net over the outpost. The light spread, and the earth trembled slightly, not in alarm, but like a whisper from the tree. Soldiers of the Kingrick Royal Army didn't panic. They turned toward the tree with solemn faces, heads slightly bowed as if in prayer. Where the outpost had stood, a new military fortress rose, walls 8 meters high, an inner diameter of 100 meters, bristling with ballistae, Hate Fort. The original outpost now sat about 100 meters away. Between the new fort and the outpost, a repaired relay station, also blessed and appearing as if by miracle, was created. Hidden within that relay station, another crucial figure had been summoned, a person second only to Hate Fort in the amount of golden grace spent. Inside the fort, former demi-human clusters and the Kingrick soldiers who had once betrayed Kenneth stood, clearly divided left and right. The knight captain, whom Tarns had once driven down a path of blood, stood at the front, crimson eyes visible under his helm, scanning the scene with a mix of confusion and dread. Then he caught the scent of blood and looked up to see a tarnished, with black, choppy hair. The Bloodlord's power thrummed from within, asserting dominance. Clang. The knight captain dropped to one knee and presented his greatsword with both hands, head bowed in submission. The soldiers behind him knelt as well, everyone except for a bulky man whose sight and hearing were impaired by a large pumpkin-shaped helmet. A theatrical, familiar voice piped into Tarns's ear. "Where is this? Great Elden Lord, why is that blood-crazed knight captain here? Why has the golden tree become so small? Why is the sunlight so bright? You truly have summoned me to a marvelous place." Tarns turned and spread his arms in welcome. Before him stood two newly arrived friends. Kenneth Haight himself, an elegantly bearing, golden-haired, middle-aged man in noble attire, and beside him, a young, beautiful, dark-haired woman in a blue sorcerer's robe. Her voice had a lazy, cultivated intelligence. "This is Middle-earth," Tarns said. "I urgently need your help, Mr. Kenneth Haight, and Teacher Selen. Thank you for 1,000 favorites. I really appreciate every recommendation ticket, monthly ticket, and tip. Special thanks to Muji Gangbai for the tip. Seriously, I rarely get tipped like this, and it's exciting." Someone asked about power levels. Don't worry. I love both Tolkien and Miyazaki, and I won't suppress either side's power arbitrarily. Yes, a few hundred orcs are no match for the protagonist, plus Nefeli Lu, Rogia, and the Kingrick Royal Army. I won't make the protagonist lose unfairly. But orcs are annoying because they're like cockroaches, endlessly popping up. So I arranged for the summoning of Hate Fort to remove the fear of night raids and allow Tarns to deal with them decisively. Also, I'll appropriately enlarge the scale of lands between buildings when they're summoned. Gameplay sized a lot of things smaller than they should be. Height has been fairly accurate, though. Chapter 19. Is it really a night raid? Selen, the witch, had been Tarns's only magic teacher in the lands between. If Rogier had been the enlightener who opened the great door of magic to him, Selen had been the guide who honed Tarns into a master of glintstone sorcery. She rested her right hand against her chin, her left arm folded across her chest, cerulean eyes calmly watching the blue sky. The stars she knew were not there. She turned her gaze to her disciple, and 8 similar repetitive memories washed over her like a tide, leaving her a little dizzy. Kenneth Haight, standing beside her, was likewise affected. The flood of memories made him somewhat dazed. But Selen, a consummate sorceress, was less shaken by the influx. She sorted through the recollections in seconds. She looked at Tarns with a complicated expression and a hint of self-mockery. "Heh, I never expected that the path I chose would amount to nothing more than useless reincarnations, over and over. Disciple, are you foolish or stubborn? In all 8 lives you stood by me without fail. If that fellow Jarian had been summoned by you as well, he'd be furious, wouldn't he?" Tarns smiled and shook his head. "A teacher for a day is a father for life. Besides, teacher, you didn't look down on me as a tarnished and you taught me magic. One must know gratitude. That alone binds me to you. I will stand by your side and fight with you whenever you face danger." Selen's lips curved in a small smile. "You're still as eloquent as ever. Wasn't it you, that strange fellow, who boldly sought me out to learn from this witch? Fine. Tell your teacher what trouble you've run into." Her eyes drifted to the golden tree, now vastly different from the one in her memories. "Do you want your teacher to help cultivate the golden tree?" That's simple. Disciple, you should know the best nourishment for a golden tree is the souls of living creatures. Bring a great number of living things to the tree and slaughter them." Tarns listened to his teacher's familiar, cold, detached manner and smiled wryly, shaking his head. He would not commit wholesale slaughter. Not only would he have nowhere to find so many creatures aside from orcs, but the creator god of this world would never permit rebuilding his homeland by wanton slaughter. Tarnis's own conscience would not allow it. If he did, he feared becoming like Smaug's bloodfingers, consumed by violence until they lost themselves. Selen noticed the expression she had seen in him before and teased, "But your teacher knows you wouldn't use that method. Still, come to me when you have trouble with magic." She glanced at Kenneth, who had recovered and now wore an incredulous look. "It seems a member of the Golden Tree's royal family has sorted his memories as well. You two talk. Your teacher has plenty of time." Tarns nodded. "I've kept the basement you were staying in before. I'll take you there." Selen hummed softly, then pulled on her witch's glintstone crown set with emerald gems, hiding her delicate face, and began to meditate. Kenneth Haight, the middle-aged man with a day or two of stubble, swallowed and let out a long sigh. "Tarns, your majesty, I don't know what to say." Tarnis stepped forward, gave him a welcoming hug, released him, and stepped back. Let's make this brief. For certain reasons, I left the lands between and came to this land called Middle-earth. I made an agreement with that world's creator god. He allowed me to recreate everything from the lands between here. The problem is an evil force called orcs has set its sights on the golden tree. We don't know when they'll strike. Kenneth forced his tangled thoughts into order, then asked, "What numbers and strength are we facing? And how staunch are our defenses?" Tarns answered quickly. Individually, the orcs are weak. A single orc has about combat power of a demi-human. They win by numbers. They often fight alongside fierce mounts called wargs, which are much stronger than an orc alone. I estimate the attacking force at over 100, possibly far more. And our side, Kenneth continued, we have your new liege, Nefeli Luke, the Storm King, Roger, who knows Carrion sword sorcery and glintstone sorcery, and now my teacher, Selen. With each name, Kenneth's expression grew stranger. Tarns frowned. Is there a problem? Kenneth opened his mouth, then recalled Tarns's station, breathed deep, and asked instead, Tarnis, your majesty? Are you worried that 100 enemies of demi-human strength could break through your and Lady Nefeli's lines and take Fort Hate? Honestly, I think it would take 10 times that number for them to succeed. Even then, only because so many would be able to slip past defenses. Tarnis slapped his forehead and laughed. You misunderstood. I'm not worried they can break in. I'm only telling you the current situation. Kenneth muttered to himself a few grumbles, then with ceremony replied, Rest assured, with me here, Fort Hate will not let any enemy through. From outside the fort came Nefeli Luke's voice. Tarns, I didn't expect you to bring Fort Hate out. Tarns heard the boisterous chatter of dwarves as he made his way to the battlements. Not only that, Kenneth Hate is here too. You can come right in, he called down. Selen, already impatient with crowds, paced over and said flatly, Disciple, this place is far too crowded. I don't like crowds. Where is my basement? Take me there. Tarns led Selen back to the basement beneath the waypoint, passing Nefeli and the dwarves along the way. He hurried back to the battlements. By the time he returned, Knight Captain Godric was marshalling the royal troops, deploying defenses and patrolling the walls. Kenneth stood respectfully by Nefeli's side. The dwarves watched everything with keen curiosity. The misbegotten were no longer in the center of the plaza. Kenneth informed Tarns that under his orders, they had been set to scout around Fort Hate rather than stand in the joint defenses. Their prejudice and arrogance wouldn't vanish quickly, he said, so it was safer to keep them at a distance. Thankfully, the stubborn knight captain, for reasons unknown, respected Tarns enough not to refuse an order carried in his name. Kenneth sighed as he glanced up at Godric. Fili, Killy, and Dwalin strode over, disbelief plain on their faces. Killy especially, who had a glint of excitement. What a magical wizardry, Mr. Tarns. I've never seen a fortress rise out of the ground before, Killy gushed, eyes bright. Fili and Dwalin nodded in impressed approval at Fort Hate's defenses. Because Nefeli had vouched for them, Kenneth treated the dwarves as honorable guests rather than hostile soldiers. Tarnis turned to Fili, who was almost stamping his foot to test if the stronghold was real. Fili, let your kin shelter in the fortress for now. It'll be cramped, but far better than being out where orcs can get at you. Fili's wheat-colored mustache twitched as he grinned. We dwarves aren't fragile like men. Any roof over our heads is a fine place to be. Dwalin hesitated, then said, We just saw a group of creatures like goblins leave the fortress. Kenneth quickly intervened. You've mistaken them, sir. They are misbegotten from the lands between, not the same as the goblins you mean. Though shabby in dress and appearance, they possess reason and wisdom. Tarns added, Kenneth's right. I even have a misbegotten tailor friend. Keely laughed triumphantly and slapped Dwalin on the back. See, Dwalin, I told you they weren't goblins. Kenneth chuckled. Still, I'd be grateful if Sir Dwalin would tell me about goblins. I'm quite curious. Dwalin shrugged. Very well. We already told Sir Tarns on the road, but if you want to hear it. A short while ago, an orc hid among the trees and ruined houses and watched with bloodshot eyes as 7 wagons rolled into the ruined town. When all 7 had passed out of sight, the orc rose, called to a listless warg, and led it back the way they came. They arrived at a hidden camp in another desolate stretch of forest where orcs and wargs crouched among rocks and trees. Dorgas, Kozdain, dwarves! The orc cried in a twisted tongue to a broad-shouldered orc whose arm was studded with iron plates and whose helmet was a human skull. The captain narrowed his eyes and jerked the messenger forward. Dwarves, are you sure? The terrified orc nodded frantically. I'm sure, Captain. 7 wagons, full of dwarves. A human wizard in armor led them inside. Humph. Human wizard. The captain threw the messenger to the ground, wary. The orc scrambled to its feet and kept quiet. Another orc, riding a warg and similar in build to the captain, approached. Captain, the human wizard has returned. Do we still attack tonight? The captain's jaw snapped. He bared yellowed teeth and snarled low, drool at the corners of his mouth. Of course, humans return to their homes and celebrate. That night, they let down their guard. We'll use their sleep against them and cleave off their heads. If the wizard loses his head, he won't live. The sub-captain flinched and stepped back. You're right. The captain was pleased by the submission and roared triumphantly. And now there are dwarf filth in the human wizard's territory. We'll bring the heads of dwarves and the head of that wizard to present to Sir Azog. The warg beneath him gave a low, eager roar. The others were about to answer, but were hushed by the captain's bark. Quiet, fools. Do you want that human wizard to know we're nearby? A broad gathering of Minas Tirith's orcs had converged here, far more than 100. Those who had escaped previous skirmishes respected the power of this human wizard. The captain had bullied or coerced the other captains into submission and brought them together. If a few disobedient captains weren't holding back, the army would already be moving. The sun bled toward the horizon like a stained blade. Night, a massive beast, swallowed the light. Dark clouds smeared the sky, blotting out familiar stars and hiding the moon. Damp, chilling air threaded through the forest, the wind setting every branch and leaf to whispering. Distant mountains loomed as shadows. The occasional night bird's cry cut the silence, sharpening a nameless dread. Wargs and their riders melted through the darkness. The predator's eyes glinted with hunger. Their feet rustled dry leaves like war drums, a cadence for the coming ambush. Evil and shadow crept forward until the orc captain's eyes widened. An old gray fortress had materialized at some unknown hour, and the battlements glittered with crossbow bolts leveled straight at them. Fire the arrows! Kenneth Haight's voice cracked through the night like thunder. Chapter 20. The Path of Blood. Fire! On Kenneth's order, the soldiers of the Kingric Royal Army unleashed a dense volley of arrows. The shafts swept through the charging orcs and wargs like a sudden storm, impaling them in a spray of bodies. The battlefield went quiet as the fallen lay where they fell. What did you scout? The orc captain bellowed, seizing the scout who had brought them the report. His huge, filthy fingers closed around the man's throat and lifted him off the ground. The scout's pupils pinched with terror. He trembled and managed only, I don't know. Get out! The orc captain flung the scout aside. Wargs tore into the body with wet, hungry sounds. The orc captain glared at Haight Fort. It was sturdier than he'd anticipated, ringed with lethal ballistae and manned by far more defenders than his informant had reported. They would need siege ladders and rams to take it, and those were not things they could have dragged through the elven and human kingdoms to the western reaches of Minhirioth. He looked at his ridiculous iron sword and then at the fortress walls. This place was beyond their reach with what they had. Orcs and wargs, driven forward under his command, kept charging the walls and being cut down by arrow fire. Rage and helplessness burned in the captain's chest. Curse that cunning human wizard! He wanted to tear the wizard's head off with his own hands. Yet retreat now would bring the scorn of other orc leaders and leave him unable to face his true master. He roared, Forget the fortress, you idiots. Burn every building outside the walls. That human wizard will pay. He had seen a small way station and a watchtower on his approach, lightly guarded, but his desire to strike at the golden tree had blinded him to their importance. At his command, the orcs abandoned the assault on Haight Fort. Their small swords would not breach the walls. Destroying the exposed outposts would be far easier and less deadly. After you level everything, surround the fort. Let's see what tricks that wizard has left when he's trapped inside. Humans still need to eat and drink. The orc captain spat, baring his teeth at the bastion. Kenneth Haight, watching from the battlements, let out a small breath of relief when the enemy pulled back. He smiled at Feely, Keely, and Dwalin, the three dwarves still standing on crates and loosing arrows at the stragglers, and offered them a polite thanks. "Thank you for your help. The rest we can leave to Tarns, your majesty, and Nephili Lu." Keely nodded and kept firing. Feely and Dwalin, whose archery was less assured, climbed down from their crates. Feely, Durin's representative, grinned at Kenneth. "It's not often we get to fight without our lives on the line and just enjoy slaughtering orcs. I should be thanking you, Mr. Haight." "But is Mr. Tarns safe out there? When the orcs pull back, I intend we go out to meet them." Feely asked with genuine concern. Kenneth smiled. "Thank you, but trust Tarns, your majesty. Nephili Lu is also with him. Our bigger worry is how many orcs will slip away tonight." Dwalin clapped a heavy hand on the parapet. "I've seen Tarns fight, but that's not the point. We dwarves will not sit cozy inside while our friends bleed outside. Filey and I feel the same. When you hear clashing near Tarns, let Feely and me down the wall." Keely joined in without hesitation. Kenneth stroked his golden beard and, seeing their stubborn resolve, finally relented. "All right, I'll send 2 soldiers with you." That left Haight Fort manned by the demi-human crew who operated the ballistae and 4 Kingrick soldiers, the absolute minimum Kenneth dared keep. He couldn't be sure the orcs weren't feigning retreat, and the 4 soldiers would also help get the dwarves back to safety if things went wrong. The orcs hadn't realized most of the archers on the battlements were demi-humans under Kenneth's orders. If the orc captain had not been blinded by rage, he'd have seen that the early ambush killed the ones who overran the trap. Afterward, losses to the fortress were much lower than he assumed. The Kingrick soldiers and Feely's men had inflicted most of the real casualties. Where had the knight captain and other defenders gone? Tarns had stationed them in the watchtower, concealed and ready. Tarns and Nephili Luke had listened to Feely and his companions and learned orc habits. If they couldn't take Haight Fort, they'd turn on the outpost and watchtower outside. Tarns had no intention of letting the watchtower fall. The way station was small, and Selen stood guard inside, so Tarnis felt confident. He'd posted Rogier and 2 Pumpkinhead soldiers in the spacious room outside Selen's basement to ensure nothing happened to him. 1 Pumpkinhead soldier came from Haight Fort. The other had stood watch outside Selen's door in the lands between. From the dim interior of the watchtower, Tarns watched the knight captain beside him. This man, one of those tarnished who had fallen down the path of blood, heard the distant screams as arrows found orcs and wargs. His restlessness grew. The whites of his eyes reddened, his hand tightened on the cold hilt of his greatsword. Tarns laid a heavy palm on the knight captain's shoulder plate. "Patience. There will be plenty to slaughter. I will not stop you." The knight captain's agitation ebbed a touch. Tarnas produced a blood-red knight's medal from his spatial pack, soaked as if with fresh blood, engraved with Smaug's 3-pronged curse spear symbol. The knight captain's breath quickened when he saw it, and eager hunger lit his features. Tarnas tossed the medal lightly. The man followed it with hungry eyes. "You recognize this pureblood knight's medal?" Tarns said. "You know how hard it is to get." The knight captain nodded repeatedly. Tarns's voice went stern. "If you want this, you must not be like a beast, unable to restrain your urge to slaughter. Otherwise, what makes you any different from those orcs?" The knight captain fell silent for a few heartbeats. Then, in a low voice, "I understand." Tarns inclined his head. "When the time comes, I will personally give it to you. For now, you will obey my orders." "Yes, sir," the knight captain rasped. Tarns knew the knight captain's true loyalty lay not with him, but with Smaug's great rune inside him. Still, that hardly mattered. Serving Smaug and serving Tarns would mean the same in battle. If this knight captain answered to Smaug's power, perhaps other Bloodfingers would too. Dangerous as they were, such men, properly commanded, would be a terrible asset. Tarns had an idea. Let these blood-hungry Tarnished hunt the orcs. Bloodfingers craved slaughter. Why not direct that fury against the orcs that stubbornly refused to be wiped out? Evil could be met with worse evil. The orcs' shouts rose as they smashed into the outpost. "Destroy those tower and tents! If you find humans hiding, rip them apart, the orc captain ordered. Tarns patted the knight captain's shoulder, this time a signal to unleash his bloodlust. The man's eyes flashed red. He drew his greatsword and kicked the watchtower door open with a boom. The iron door smashed outward and struck the nose of a warg that had been scenting the human air. The beast yelped in surprise. The orc atop the warg's back froze, then the world erupted into a crimson tide. A bloodlight flooded its vision, as if 1,000 droplets congealed into a mist that swallowed the world. Its sight dissolved, and something vast and dark dragged its mind down into an abyss. Around the doorway, orcs froze at the sight. The once proud rider and his warg split in two, gore splattered across the threshold. The others staggered back, feet scuffing stones, panic hissing through the ranks. Even the orc captain hesitated. Heavy boots sounded, each thud a hammer on the enemy's heart. The knight captain stepped into the open, steady and terrible. He cradled his greatsword, smeared with blackened orc blood and organs, in both hands and swung in a fluid, dreadful arc. Gore scattered like autumn leaves. I said, "Tear them to shreds. He's only a human knight. What are you fools afraid of?" The orc captain bellowed, trying to reclaim control. One orc, goaded by command and fear, hefted its crude axe and charged. The knight captain met it with faster, crazed force, crashing into the mob with a roar like a beast. "Raise my sword. Let the blood surge." His bellow cut across the skirmish. Steel sang and bloodlight shot with each strike, arcing from his blade and carving a trail through the orcs. As his slaughter drew the enemy's attention, other defenders revealed themselves. The Kingric soldiers who had been hidden in other watchtowers crested their parapets. 2 soldiers stood on each watchtower, crossbows already braced. Whoosh! Bolts screamed through the air. The orcs had heard that sound below. Now it found them again. The Kingric soldiers fired in disciplined volleys, far more accurate than the demi-humans on the fort walls. The first rain of bolts cut down 20 of the orc captain's men. An injured warg, lucky to avoid a killing shot, howled and charged the door, enraged. The watchtower door opened again. A cold-headed spear drove into the warg's skull, burying to the haft. A knight marched out, clad like the blood-stained knight captain, but steadier. He bore a golden-yellow great shield and a long spear. He glanced at the other knight, a flash of judgment in his eyes, then spat and leveled his spear at the confused orcs. "Don't let that knight who's gone to the blood steal our first glory from Tarns, your majesty," he called to the 4 soldiers ambushed behind him. "All units, march with me," he shouted. Boots pounded, spears were leveled, and the defenders surged outward, soldiers and knights, shield and spear forming a moving wall. Around them, the orcs faltered under sudden, coordinated force. Blood and light and bolted wood filled the night as the battle at the outpost tilted back toward the humans and their strange, terrible allies.